The steel beam fell like God's own hammer, crushing the roof of the Mercedes until metal screamed against metal. Inside, Claire Whitman, billionaire, CEO, master of boardrooms, conqueror of markets, was trapped and bleeding her empire meaningless against twisted steel and shattered glass. Then, rough, calloused hands reached through the wreckage, and a stranger's voice cut through her panic. "I've got you. Trust me." He pulled her from death's grip and vanished into the rain, leaving only his worn jacket on her shoulders. Welcome to a story about what happens when everything money can buy meets the one thing it can't. Stick around to the end and drop a comment about where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story has traveled. The rain hammered Seattle like it held a personal grudge against the city, turning the evening commute into a crawling nightmare of red taillights and honking horns. Luke Bennett gripped the steering wheel of his decade-old pickup truck, checking the dashboard clock for the third time in 2 minutes. 6:47 p.m. Sophie's after-school program closed at 7, and they charged $1 for every minute he was late. Dollars he didn't have to spare. Come on, he muttered, drumming his fingers against the worn leather as traffic inched forward. The construction site he'd just left was paying good money, but the overtime that kept food on the table also meant these mad dashes across the city had become routine. Single parenthood was a delicate balance of necessities each day, a careful calculation of time versus money, neither of which he had enough of. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Sophie's school. His stomach tightened as he hit the speaker button. "Mr. Bennett? This is Mrs. Chen from Riverside Elementary. Sophie's still here waiting." "I know, I'm so sorry. I'm stuck on the Aurora Bridge approach. The construction there's been an accident up ahead. I'll be there as soon as—" The world exploded. Luke's words died as a massive steel beam, part of the bridge's ongoing renovation, broke free from a crane overhead. Time seemed to slow as the beam plummeted through the rain, its shadow growing larger, darker, until it crashed down onto a silver Mercedes S-Class 3 cars ahead. The sound was catastrophic, a thunderclap of crushing metal and shattering glass that silenced even the rain for a heartbeat. "Mr. Bennett? Mr. Bennett, are you there?" Luke was already moving. He threw the truck into park, yanked the keys from the ignition, and sprinted toward the wreckage. Other drivers sat frozen in shock, some fumbling for phones, but Luke's body moved on pure instinct, the same instinct that had kept him alive through 2 tours in Afghanistan. The Mercedes was unrecognizable. The beam had crushed the roof down to window level, the elegant lines of German engineering compressed into a metal coffin. Through the spider-webbed remains of the rear window, Luke could see movement. Someone was alive in there. "Call 911, he shouted to the gathering crowd, dropping to his knees beside the wreckage. The rain soaked through his jeans instantly, but he barely noticed. Through a gap in the twisted metal, he could see her, a woman in what had probably been an expensive suit, now torn and bloodied. She was conscious, but trapped her eyes wide with the particular terror of someone who'd just discovered money couldn't buy their way out of everything. "Can you hear me?" Luke called out, his voice cutting through the rain and the growing chaos around them. I can't move," she gasped. "My legs are pinned. The car is... Oh God, I smell gas." Luke smelled it too. The acrid tang of leaking fuel mixed with the metallic scent of rain on hot metal. He looked at the beam. It must have weighed 2 tons, maybe more. The crowd was growing, but they kept their distance, phones out recording instead of helping. "What's your name?" Luke asked, already assessing the wreckage for the weakest point. Claire Whitman." The name rang a bell. He'd seen it on billboards, maybe the news, but it didn't matter now. "Okay, Claire, I'm Luke. I'm going to get you out, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She nodded, a jerky, desperate motion. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, mixing with the rain that found its way through the gaps in the wreckage. Luke stood scanning the crowd. "I need help lifting this beam. Anyone?" 30 people stood watching. 3 stepped forward, 2 young men in Amazon delivery uniforms and an older woman in scrubs, probably a nurse heading home from a shift. It wasn't enough, not nearly, but it would have to be. "We can't lift that," one of the delivery drivers said, his face pale. "We need to wait for the fire department." "She doesn't have time," Luke said firmly. He'd seen enough vehicles go up in flames to know the signs. The fuel leak was getting worse, and somewhere in that maze of crushed metal and exposed wiring, one spark would turn this rescue into a recovery. We're not lifting it completely, just enough to pull her out. On my count. He positioned himself at the beam's edge, his hands finding purchase on the cold, wet steel. The others followed his lead, though their faces showed their doubt. Luke had lifted heavier things in worse conditions, not alone true, but desperation had a way of lending strength. Claire, when we lift you, pull yourself toward my voice. Don't think, just move. Understood? Yes, she whispered. Luke met the eyes of his makeshift rescue team. The nurse nodded, grim determination replacing her initial hesitation. The delivery drivers gripped the beam, their knuckles white. 3, 2, 1, lift. The beam didn't budge. Again. Luke growled, adjusting his grip. His construction site gloves gave him better purchase than the others' bare hands. Put your backs into it. 3, 2, 1. This time the beam shifted not much, maybe 3 inches, but 3 inches was a lifetime in a moment like this. Luke's muscles screamed, tendons straining against the impossible weight. Move, Claire, now. Through the gap, he could see her pulling herself forward, using her arms to drag her body across the crushed leather seats. The smell of gasoline grew stronger. One of the delivery drivers lost his grip, cursing as the wet metal slipped through his fingers. Hold it! Luke roared, taking more weight as the beam threatened to drop. Almost there! Claire's hand appeared through a gap in the wreckage, reaching, grasping at air. Luke made a decision that his back would make him regret for weeks. He shifted his entire position, taking the beam's weight on his shoulder while freeing one hand to grab hers. Pull, he commanded the others, using his grip on Claire to guide her through the twisted metal. She cried out as something, probably a torn piece of the car's frame, caught her leg, but she kept moving. Let go, someone screamed. It's going to fall. Not yet, Luke gritted out. Claire was halfway out now, her expensive suit shredded her perfect composure, replaced by raw survival instinct. With a final desperate pull, she cleared the wreckage. Drop it! They released the beam as one jumping back as it crashed down, crushing the Mercedes even further. Luke caught Claire as she stumbled, her legs giving out the moment she was free. He half carried, half dragged her away from the wreck, his jacket somehow already off his shoulders, and wrapped around hers before he'd consciously decided to do it. They'd made it maybe 20 feet when the Mercedes went up in flames. The explosion wasn't Hollywood dramatic, no massive fireball or slow-motion dive for cover. Just a sudden whoosh of ignition heat that Luke could feel on the back of his neck, and the knowledge that they'd had maybe 30 seconds to spare. Claire was shaking violently, shock setting in as adrenaline faded. Luke lowered her carefully to the ground, keeping his jacket around her shoulders. The nurse was there immediately, checking vitals, assessing injuries with practiced efficiency. You're okay, Luke said quietly, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. You're safe now. Claire looked up at him, and for a moment their eyes met, really met. Hers were green, he noticed the color of sea glass, now wide, with a mixture of terror and gratitude that went beyond words. She opened her mouth to speak, but Luke was already standing. Take care of her, he told the nurse, then turned and walked back toward his truck. Wait, Claire called out, her voice hoarse. I don't even know you're... But Luke was already gone, weaving through the crowd that had grown to probably 100 people, now all of them focused on the burning Mercedes and the woman who'd impossibly survived. Nobody noticed the man in the wet t-shirt and muddy jeans climbing into an old pickup truck. Luke's hands shook as he started the engine. 7:03 p.m. He was going to be late picking up Sophie. As he pulled away from the scene, using the shoulder to escape the gridlock, he caught a glimpse of Claire in his rearview mirror. She was still sitting on the ground, his jacket around her shoulders, staring at the spot where he'd been. He didn't stop. He had a daughter to pick up. Sophie was the last kid at the after-school program, sitting in the principal's office with her backpack in her lap, and that particular expression 6-year-olds got when they were trying very hard not to cry. Luke's heart broke a little as he rushed in, still damp from the rain, still smelling faintly of gasoline and smoke. Daddy! She launched herself at him, all previous upset forgotten in the relief of his arrival. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, he said, lifting her into his arms. There was an accident on the bridge and... Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Chen interrupted, her expression stern. This is the third time this month. I understand you're doing your best, but I know, Luke said quietly. It won't happen again. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. She'd been Sophie's teacher the previous year, had been there when Sophie's mother, when Melissa had left. There are programs that might help with extended care. I can send you some information. Programs that cost money he didn't have, but Luke nodded anyway. Thank you, I'll look into it. As they walked to the truck, Sophie's hand in his, she looked up at him with those eyes that were so much like her mother's, it sometimes took his breath away. Daddy, why are you all wet? Just got caught in the rain, baby. Where's your jacket? Luke realized he'd given it to Claire without a second thought. His only jacket, the one Melissa had bought him for their last Christmas together. I left it at work. Silly Daddy, right? Sophie giggled, the sound washing away the tension of the last hour. Very silly. As he buckled her into her booster seat, Sophie asked, Did someone need help? Is that why you were late? Luke paused. His daughter had this uncanny ability to read him to know when something was weighing on him. Yeah, someone needed help. Did you help them? I did. Good. Sophie said, simply pulling out her stuffed rabbit Mr. Hoppy from her backpack. That's what heroes do. I'm no hero, sweetheart. Just did what anyone would do. But as he drove them home through the still pouring rain, Luke couldn't shake the image of those green eyes, the weight of Claire's hand in his, the way she'd looked at him like he was something more than just another construction worker trying to make ends meet. Their apartment was a far cry from whatever penthouse Claire Whitman probably called home. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen so small 2 people could barely fit in it at the same time. But Luke had worked hard to make it a home for Sophie. Her artwork covered the refrigerator, a rainbow of crayon drawings that turned the old appliances into a gallery. He'd built her a reading nook in the corner of the living room, complete with Christmas lights and all her favorite books. Mac and cheese or spaghetti? He asked, opening the nearly bare pantry. Mac and cheese. Sophie cheered, already settling at the small kitchen table with her homework. As Luke cooked, his mind kept drifting back to the accident. Claire Whitman. Now that he had a moment to think, he realized why the name was familiar. She was the CEO of Whitman Industries, a real estate development company that had been all over the news lately for some massive waterfront project. She was the kind of person who probably had drivers and bodyguards and a whole team of people making sure she never had to face danger alone. Except today she'd been alone. And if he hadn't been there... Daddy, the water's boiling over. Luke snapped back to reality, grabbing the pot off the stove. Sorry, baby. Daddy's a little distracted tonight. After dinner, after bath time, after 2 stories, and Sophie's elaborate bedtime routine that involved checking for monsters and making sure Mr. Hoppy was tucked in just right, Luke finally had a moment to himself. He sat on the couch, with a beer, his one luxury for the week, and turned on the news. The accident was the lead story. Billionaire CEO Claire Whitman is recovering tonight after a dramatic rescue on the Aurora Bridge, the anchor announced. A construction beam fell during rush hour, trapping Ms. Whitman in her vehicle. Witnesses say a bystander managed to lift the beam and pull her free moments before the vehicle caught fire. They showed footage, shaky cell phone video of Luke and the others lifting the beam, though the rain and distance made it impossible to identify anyone clearly. Then they cut to a hospital where a reporter stood outside Swedish Medical Center. Miss Whitman is in stable condition with non-life-threatening injuries, the reporter said. She's released a statement thanking the unknown Good Samaritan who saved her life and expressing her desire to find and properly thank this hero. Luke turned off the TV. Hero. He wasn't a hero. Heroes didn't struggle to pay rent. Heroes didn't have to choose between new shoes for their daughter and keeping the electricity on. Heroes didn't lose their wives because they couldn't provide the life she'd dreamed of. His phone rang. The construction foreman probably calling about tomorrow's shift. Luke almost didn't answer, but he needed the hours. Bennett, you see the news? What about it? That was you, wasn't it? On the bridge, Jimmy said he saw your truck there. Luke was silent. Christ, Bennett, you saved Claire Whitman. Do you have any idea who she is, what she's worth? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Luke, she's going to want to reward you. This could be your ticket out of... Luke hung up. He didn't want a ticket out that he hadn't earned with his own hands. He'd learned that lesson the hard way with Melissa, watching her grow more frustrated with every passing month when he'd refused her father's offer to join his investment firm, insisting instead on making an honest living with honest work. "You're too proud," she'd said the night she left. "Too proud to take help. Too proud to admit you can't give Sophie everything she deserves on your own." Maybe she'd been right, but pride was sometimes all a man had. The next morning came too soon, Luke's body protesting every movement. His back was a symphony of pain from lifting the beam, and his hands were cut in a dozen places from the twisted metal. But Bills didn't care about pain, so he dropped Sophie at school and headed to the construction site. The guys treated him differently. Word had spread somehow, it always did on job sites. They looked at him with a mixture of respect and confusion, unable to understand why he hadn't stuck around to claim his reward. "You could have been set for life," Tommy, another single dad on the crew, said during lunch break. "Could have asked for anything." "I didn't do it for money," Luke said, focusing on his sandwich. "Must be nice to be so noble you don't need money, Mug," Tommy shot back, but there was no real heat in it. They all knew Luke's situation had seen him eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to save money for Sophie's field trips. Luke was about to respond when the foreman's voice boomed across the site. "Bennett, you got visitors." Luke looked up to see two people in expensive suits picking their way across the construction site, looking hilariously out of place. One was a younger man with perfectly styled hair. The other, a woman in heels that kept sinking into the dirt. "Mr. Bennett," the man called out. "Mr. Luke Bennett." Luke set down his tools and walked over, aware that every eye on the site was watching. "That's me. My name is James Morrison. I'm Miss Whitman's personal assistant. This is Rebecca Liu from our legal department. Ms. Whitman would very much like to meet with you." "She okay?" Luke asked. "Thanks to you, yes. She's being discharged today. She's requested that you come to her office this afternoon." Luke shook his head. "I appreciate it, but I've got work." James and Rebecca exchanged glances, clearly not used to being turned down. "Mr. Bennett, Ms. Whitman is very insistent. She's authorized me to compensate you for any lost wages." "Not necessary." "Sir?" Rebecca stepped forward. "You saved her life. She simply wants to thank you." "She already did. Through the news." James pulled out a business card, pressing it into Luke's reluctant hand. "Please, Mr. Bennett. She won't take no for an answer. 4 o'clock Whitman Tower. She'll wait for you." They left, navigating back through the construction site in their inappropriate footwear. Luke looked at the card, heavy stock, embossed lettering, the kind of card that probably cost more than his lunch. He was about to toss it when Tommy grabbed his arm. "You're going," Tommy said. "No, I'm not." "Luke, listen to me. I get it, you're proud, but you've got Sophie to think about. At least hear what she has to say." Luke wanted to argue, but Tommy's words hit their mark. Sophie. Everything always came back to Sophie. The field trip next month that he couldn't afford, the dance classes she wanted to take, the college fund that didn't exist. "I've got to pick up Sophie at 3:30, he said finally. "I'll get her," Tommy offered immediately. "Katie's been begging for a play date anyway. I'll take them both to the park, get them ice cream. Give you time to do this." Luke stared at the card again. Whitman Tower. He'd helped build the foundation for that building 3 years ago, back when it was just a hole in the ground and architectural drawings. He'd never imagined he'd be invited inside once it was finished. At 3:45, Luke stood outside the gleaming glass and steel tower, feeling acutely aware of his work boots and faded jeans. He'd changed into his leaf-stained t-shirt in the porta-potty at the construction site, but he still looked like what he was, a manual laborer, in a building full of people who probably made more in a day than he did in a month. The lobby was all marble and modern art, with a waterfall that probably cost more than his annual salary. The security guard looked him up and down skeptically, until Luke produced the business card. "Mr. Bennett." "Yes, you're expected. Express elevator to the 42nd floor." The elevator was bigger than Sophie's bedroom. Luke stood in the corner, watching the numbers climb his stomach, doing an uncomfortable flip with each floor. What was he doing here? What could someone like Claire Whitman possibly have to say to someone like him? The doors opened directly into a reception area that looked like something out of a magazine. Everything was white and chrome and impossibly clean. A receptionist who looked like she'd stepped off a runway smiled at him with perfect teeth. "Mr. Bennett, Ms. Whitman is waiting for you. Right this way." She led him down a hallway lined with awards and framed magazine covers featuring Claire. Fortune's 40 Under 40, Times The Future of Real Estate, Forbes Self-Made Women to Watch. In every photo, she looked polished, confident, untouchable, nothing like the terrified woman he'd pulled from a crushed Mercedes. The office at the end of the hall was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the Sound that took Luke's breath away. And there, standing with her back to him as she looked out at the city, was Claire Whitman. She'd changed since yesterday, obviously. Gone were the torn clothes and the blood. She wore a navy dress that probably cost more than his truck. Her dark hair pulled back in a way that showed the small bandage on her forehead, the only visible sign of yesterday's trauma. "The city looks different from up here," she said without turning around. "Cleaner, safer. It's a lie, of course. The distance just makes it easier to pretend the mess doesn't exist." She turned then, and those green eyes found his again. In the afternoon light, they were even more striking than he remembered. "Mr. Bennett, Luke, thank you for coming. Ms. Whitman. Claire, please." She moved closer, and he could see now that she was favoring her left leg slightly. "I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything." "I disagree." She gestured to a sitting area, leather chairs that looked too expensive to actually sit in. Luke remained standing. Claire sighed. "At least let me offer you something to drink. Coffee water. Something stronger. God knows I've been drinking since noon." Despite himself, Luke almost smiled. "I'm good." "Of course you are." She studied him with those intense eyes. "My people did some research. Luke Bennett, 32 years old, Army veteran, 2 tours in Afghanistan, construction worker for the last 7 years, single father to Sophie, age 6. Luke's jaw tightened. "You investigated me." "I wanted to know who saved my life." She paused. "I'm sorry about your wife." "Don't." The word came out harsher than he intended. "That's not your business." "You're right. I apologize." She moved to her desk, pulling out a checkbook. "Let me get to the point. Name your price." "Excuse me." "For saving my life, whatever you want. Money is just numbers on a screen to me, Mr. Bennett. 100,000, 500,000, a million. What number makes this right?" Luke stared at her, anger building in his chest. "You think you can just write a check and we're even?" "I think everyone has a price." "Then you think wrong." She blinked clearly, not used to being contradicted. "I'm trying to thank you." "No, you're trying to pay me off. There's a difference." Luke turned to leave. "Take care of yourself, Ms. Whitman." "Wait." Her voice cracked slightly, losing its CEO polish. "Please." Luke stopped at the door but didn't turn around. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. "I know how to make deals. I know how to negotiate. I know how to win. But I don't know how to owe someone everything when they want nothing in return." Luke turned back to see her standing by the window again, her composed mask slipping. "You ever think maybe that's the point?" he asked. "Not everything's a transaction. Sometimes people help because it's the right thing to do. In my experience, everyone wants something. Then you've been hanging around the wrong people." She laughed, but it was bitter. "The wrong people built this tower. The wrong people run this city. The wrong people are the only people I know." Luke shouldn't care. This woman lived in a different world, one where problems were solved with checkbooks and connections. But something in her voice, a loneliness that money couldn't fix, made him pause. "You want to thank me," he said finally. "Don't make it about money. That construction site where I work, we've got guys there who haven't seen their families in months because they're sending every penny home. You want to do something? Use some of that money to help them. Set up a fund or something. Help their kids get to college. That would mean something." Claire stared at him. "You're serious. You're actually turning down a fortune for yourself to help others." "I don't need your fortune. I've got everything I need." "Your daughter has a father who works hard and loves her. That's more than a lot of kids get. And when she wants to go to college, when she needs opportunities you can't provide." The words hit too close to Melissa's parting shots. I'll figure it out. Pride, Claire said softly. It must be nice to afford such an expensive luxury. It's not pride. It's principle. Is there a difference? Before Luke could answer, his phone rang. Tommy. Luke answered immediately, worried something had happened with Sophie. Hey man, small problem. Sophie fell at the park. She's okay, just scraped her knee pretty bad, but she's asking for you. I'm on my way. Luke hung up and looked at Claire. I have to go. Your daughter. She needs me. Claire's expression shifted to something unreadable. Of course. James can drive you. I've got my truck. Right, of course. She pulled out a different card, simpler than the one James had given him. My personal cell, in case you change your mind, or if you ever need anything. Luke took the card mostly to end the conversation. Take care, Ms. Whitman. Claire, she corrected softly. But Luke was already gone. His mind focused on Sophie. He didn't see Claire watching from her window as he jogged across the parking lot to his beat-up truck. Didn't see her press her hand against the glass as he drove away. Didn't see her turn to James, who'd been silently observing from the corner, and say, find out everything about that construction worker fund he mentioned. I want it operational by Monday. Sophie was crying when Luke reached the park, her knee a mess of blood and dirt. But she brightened immediately when she saw him launching herself into his arms despite the pain. Daddy, I was brave. I only cried a little. You're the bravest girl I know, Luke said, examining the wound. It would need proper cleaning and probably butterfly bandages, but no stitches. Let's get you home and fixed up. Can we get ice cream after? Sophie asked hopefully. For being brave. Luke thought about his wallet, about the $12 that had to last until Friday. Then he thought about Claire Whitman's checkbook, about numbers that meant nothing to her and everything to him. Sure, baby. Ice cream for brave girls. As he carried Sophie to the truck, Tommy jogged over. How'd it go? Fine. Fine. That's it. That's it. Tommy shook his head. You're either the most principled man I know or the stupidest. Probably both, Luke admitted. That night after Sophie was bandaged and fed and tucked into bed with Mr. Hoppy and a bowl of chocolate ice cream that had demolished his food budget, Luke sat on their tiny balcony and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there in one of those gleaming towers, Claire Whitman was probably looking at the same view from a very different angle. He pulled out her card, running his thumb over the embossed numbers. One call. One call, and Sophie could have everything: dance classes, college opportunities he could never provide. One call and he could stop worrying about choosing between rent and groceries. But then what would he be teaching Sophie? That principles were for sale if the price was right. That integrity was a luxury only the rich could afford. He went inside and put the card in the junk drawer buried under old takeout menus and expired coupons. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. 3 days passed. Luke fell back into his routine work, Sophie the constant juggle of bills and responsibilities. He'd almost convinced himself the whole thing had been some weird dream when the foreman called him into the office trailer. What the hell did you do, Bennett? Luke's stomach dropped. What do you mean? The foreman turned his computer screen around. On it was a letter on Whitman Industries' letterhead. They're setting up a fund. The Luke Bennett Foundation for Construction Workers' Families. $2 million initial funding. Scholarships for kids, emergency assistance for families' health care subsidies. And get this, they want you to be on the board. Luke stared at the screen. I didn't agree to this. You inspired it, apparently. That woman, Claire Whitman, she called me personally. Said you'd suggested something about helping the guys' families. She's making it happen. My name shouldn't be on it. Too late. She's already filed the paperwork. Press conference is tomorrow. I'm not doing a press conference. You don't have to. She said to tell you that your participation is welcome but not required. The fund will exist either way. The foreman leaned back in his chair, studying Luke. You really turned down a personal reward to help everyone else. I need to get back to work. Luke, the foreman's voice stopped him at the door. What you did both on that bridge and after that, something special. Don't be too proud to see that. But Luke was already gone, his mind racing. She'd done it. She'd found a way to help despite his refusal to give without making it about him. It was clever. It was generous. It was infuriating. That afternoon, Luke did something he'd never done before he left work early. He drove to Whitman Tower, marched past the surprised security guard who remembered him, and took the elevator to the 42nd floor. "Mr. Bennett," the receptionist stood quickly. "Ms. Whitman is in a meeting." But Luke was already pushing through the office doors. Claire was at a conference table with 6 other people in suits, all of whom turned to stare at him. She looked different today, hair down a green blouse that matched her eyes, no visible injuries except the fading bruise on her forehead. "Luke," she said, and something in the way she said his name made everyone else fade into background noise. "Everyone, can you give us the room?" The suits filed out, shooting curious glances at Luke's work clothes and dusty boots. When they were alone, Claire stood moving toward him with that slight favor to her left leg still noticeable. "You're angry," she observed. "You used my name. You inspired it. Credit where credit's due." "I didn't want credit. I didn't want any of this." "But the families need it. Isn't that what matters?" Luke wanted to argue, but she was right. The fund would help people he knew, people he worked beside every day. "You don't fight fair," he said finally. "I fight to win. It's different." She paused. "Will you be at the press conference?" "No." "Will you at least be on the board? Help decide how the money's distributed. You know these people better than any committee I could assemble." "Why does this matter to you so much?" Claire moved to the window and Luke found himself following. The city sprawled below them, construction sites dotting the landscape like promises of things to come. "You know what I thought about when I was trapped in that car," she said quietly. "Not my company. Not the deals I had pending, not the money in my accounts. I thought about how I was going to die alone in a Mercedes and no one would really mourn me. They'd mourn their meal ticket, their connection, their opportunity, but not me." She turned to face him, and for a moment the CEO mask slipped entirely. "Then you appeared. A stranger who wanted nothing from me, who risked everything to help me, and walked away without even giving your name. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" "It shouldn't be." "But it is." She stepped closer and Luke caught a hint of her perfume, something expensive and subtle. "I've been thinking about you, about Sophie. About the kind of father who leaves his only jacket with a stranger and lies to his daughter about losing it so she won't worry." Luke's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about that?" "The nurse from the bridge. I tracked her down too. She said you gave me your jacket and left in just a t-shirt in the rain." Claire moved to her desk, opening a drawer. "Which is why I bought you this." She pulled out a jacket, not fancy, just a good solid work jacket, the kind that would last for years. "Before you get all proud about it, it's not a reward. It's a replacement. Fair trade." Luke took the jacket, running his hands over the material. It was exactly his size, exactly the kind he'd buy for himself if he could afford quality. "How did you know my size?" "I'm very good at research." She smiled, then a real smile that transformed her face. "Will you stay for the board meeting, I mean? We're discussing the fund parameters." Luke checked his phone. He had an hour before he needed to pick up Sophie. "One condition." "Name it." "My name comes off. Call it something else." "The Second Chances Fund." "That works." Claire extended her hand. "Deal." Her handshake was firm, her hands soft where his were calloused. But there was strength there too, a different kind than his, but strength nonetheless. The meeting was unlike anything Luke had experienced. He sat at a conference table worth more than his annual salary, surrounded by lawyers and financial advisors, and told them exactly what construction workers' families needed. They listened, really listened, taking notes as he explained the reality of single parents working dangerous jobs, of families separated by economics, of kids who were smart enough for college but could never afford it. "We need emergency childcare," he said at one point. "When a guy gets hurt on the job, his wife can't work because someone needs to watch the kids. It's a spiral that destroys families." Claire wrote it down herself, her pen moving quickly across a legal pad. What else? For an hour, Luke forgot to be uncomfortable in that gleaming tower. He talked about his co-workers, their struggles, their dreams for their children. And Claire and her team turned those stories into action items, budgets, programs. As the meeting ended and Luke stood to leave, Claire walked him to the elevator. "Thank you," she said. "This wouldn't work without your input. It's a good thing you're doing. It's a good thing we're doing, she corrected. I just write checks. You're the one who knows how to make them matter. The elevator arrived and Luke stepped inside. As the doors started to close, Claire suddenly pressed the button to hold them open. Would you? She started, then stopped, seeming to reconsider. Never mind. What? It's nothing. I was going to ask if you'd like to have dinner sometime, to discuss the fund, of course, but you probably need to get back to Sophie. Luke studied her face, seeing something there he recognized. Loneliness, the kind that lived in penthouses as easily as tiny apartments. Sophie loves pizza, he said finally. There's a place near our apartment, nothing fancy, just good pizza. If you want to discuss the fund somewhere that doesn't require a suit. Claire's smile was answer enough. When? Saturday, 6 o'clock, Luigi's on Madison. I'll be there. As the elevator descended, Luke wondered what he was doing. Claire Whitman didn't belong in his world of bedtime stories and budget groceries any more than he belonged in her world of boardrooms and billions. But something about her, maybe the vulnerability he'd glimpsed beneath the armor, maybe the way she'd turned his rejection into something that would help others, made him want to see where this unexpected connection might lead. He picked up Sophie from school, listening to her chatter about her day, her art project, her best friend Katie's new backpack. Normal things, perfect things. As they walked to the truck, Sophie noticed the new jacket. Daddy, you got your jacket back. It's a different one, baby. Oh. She considered this. Is it from the person you helped? Luke thought about lying, but he'd already told her one lie about the jacket. Yeah, it is. That was nice of them. It was. Sophie was quiet for a moment, then asked, Will we see them again? Luke thought about Claire's smile about Saturday, about the strange turns life sometimes took. Maybe, sweetheart. Maybe. That night, as Luke tucked Sophie into bed, she asked, Daddy, are rich people different from us? The question caught him off guard. What makes you ask that? Katie said her mom said rich people don't care about anyone but themselves. Luke sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. Some people, rich or poor, only care about themselves. But others care about everyone. It's not about how much money you have, baby. It's about what's in your heart. What's in your heart, Daddy? You, he said, kissing her forehead. You're in every part of my heart. And maybe room for a friend, Sophie asked hopefully. You never have friends over. Luke thought about Claire again, about the way she'd looked standing in his world of construction dust and work boots, trying to understand. We'll see, baby. We'll see. As Sophie drifted off to sleep, Luke stood by her window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Claire Whitman was probably looking at the same lights from a different height, maybe thinking about Saturday, maybe wondering like he was what happened when two different worlds collided. He'd pulled her from a crushed Mercedes, but in a way she'd pulled him too out of the routine that had become his armor, out of the pride that sometimes looked a lot like fear. The Luke Bennett Foundation might be renamed, but something had started that day on the bridge, something that couldn't be contained in corporate letterheads or legal documents. It was connection. It was possibility. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Saturday arrived with unseasonable sunshine, the kind of October day that made Seattle feel like it was apologizing for all the rain. Luke stood in front of his bathroom mirror, having changed shirts 3 times. Something Sophie found hilarious. Daddy, it's just pizza, she said from the doorway. Mr. Hoppy dangling from her hand. You're right, Luke said, pulling on his original choice, a simple blue Henley that Melissa had once said brought out his eyes. He immediately pushed that thought away. This wasn't a date. This was a meeting about the fun just happening to include his daughter and pizza. Is she pretty? Sophie asked suddenly. Is who pretty? The lady we're meeting. Luke had been deliberately vague about Claire saying only that someone from his work wanted to discuss helping other workers' families. I don't know, baby. Does it matter? Sophie considered this seriously. Katie's mom says pretty ladies don't eat pizza. They eat salad. Well, then Katie's mom hasn't met the right pretty ladies. They arrived at Luigi's 10 minutes early. It was Luke's favorite spot. Nothing special to look at with its cracked vinyl booths and faded photos of Italy. But the pizza was authentic and cheap, and Luigi always gave Sophie extra breadsticks. Luke chose their usual booth in the back where Sophie could color on the paper tablecloth without bothering other customers. At exactly 6 o'clock, Claire Whitman walked through the door, and the entire restaurant seemed to pause. She'd dressed down jeans, a cashmere sweater, ankle boots, but she still looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Her hair was loose, catching the light as she scanned the restaurant. When she spotted them, her face lit up with a smile that made Luke's chest do something uncomfortable. "Is that her?" Sophie whispered loudly. "She's really pretty." "Shh," Luke said, standing as Claire approached. "Luke," Claire said warmly, then turned her attention to Sophie. "And you must be Sophie. Your dad has told me so much about you." Sophie, normally shy with strangers, surprised Luke by smiling back. "He hasn't told me anything about you. Are you rich?" "Sophie." Luke's face flushed, but Claire laughed, sliding into the booth across from them. "I have a lot of money, yes. Does that bother you?" Sophie shook her head. "Only if you don't like pizza." "I love pizza. The messier the better." "Good," Sophie declared. "Daddy was worried you'd want salad. I was not—" "He changed his shirt 3 times." Sophie continued, clearly enjoying herself. Claire's eyes met Luke's over Sophie's head, sparkling with amusement. "Well, I changed 4 times, so he wins." Luigi himself came over his thick Italian accent, making Claire lean forward to understand as he recommended the special. She ordered a large pepperoni and mushroom to share, plus garlic knots and sodas, all around dismissing Luke's attempt to protest. "Please," she said quietly, "let me buy dinner. It's the least I can do for interrupting your Saturday." As they waited for the food, Sophie peppered Claire with questions that Luke would never have dared ask. What was it like being a CEO? Did she live in a castle? Did she have a driver? Did she ever eat cereal for dinner when she was too tired to cook? Claire answered each question seriously, admitting that yes, she had a driver, but preferred to drive herself. No, she didn't live in a castle, but her apartment was probably too big, and yes, she'd eaten cereal for dinner just last Tuesday. "Daddy does that too," Sophie exclaimed, "except he gives me real food and then eats cereal after I go to bed, so I don't know we're out of groceries." Luke wanted to sink into the floor, but Claire's expression softened. "Your daddy sounds like he takes very good care of you." "He's the best," Sophie said simply, then added, "but he's lonely sometimes. I hear him talking to my mom's picture when he thinks I'm asleep." "Okay," Luke interrupted, his face burning. "Who wants to see Luigi flip the pizza dough?" Sophie was successfully distracted, running to the counter to watch. Luke started to apologize, but Claire held up her hand. "She's wonderful," she said. "Honest, real. You've done an amazing job with her. She's easy to love." "Not all parents feel that way. Trust me, I know from experience." Something flickered across Claire's face, an old pain quickly suppressed. "My parents saw me as an investment opportunity from day one. Every birthday party was a networking event. Every achievement was leverage for the next deal. That's no way to grow up. It's efficient, though. I was running my first company by 23. "And were you happy?" Claire was quiet for a moment, watching Sophie laugh as Luigi tossed dough in the air. "I didn't know I wasn't until I was trapped in that car thinking I was going to die. All that success, all that money, and the only person who cared enough to help was a stranger." Their pizza arrived, and Sophie returned chattering excitedly about Luigi's dough-spinning skills. Claire proved she wasn't afraid of messy food, diving into the pizza with enthusiasm that made Sophie declare her okay for a rich lady. As they ate, the conversation turned to the fund. Claire pulled out her phone, showing Luke the plans that had been set in motion. Already 3 families had received emergency assistance. 2 kids had been enrolled in after-school programs their parents couldn't previously afford. "This is Tommy's son," Claire said, showing a photo of a boy in a soccer uniform. "The fund paid for his league fees and equipment." Luke's throat tightened. He'd known Tommy was struggling to afford the soccer program his son loved. "You did this?" Claire said softly. "You did it. You cared enough to think of others when you could have taken everything for yourself. That's rare, Luke. Rarer than you know." Sophie, who'd been coloring on the tablecloth, looked up. "Miss Claire, are you and Daddy friends now?" Claire glanced at Luke. "I'd like to be, if that's okay with your daddy." "Daddy needs friends," Sophie announced. He only talks to Uncle Tommy and the people at work, and sometimes Mrs. Chen at school, but only when he's late picking me up. Sophie, Miss Whitman is very busy. Claire, she corrected, and I'm never too busy for friends. After dinner, they walked to the small park nearby. Sophie ran ahead to the playground, leaving Luke and Claire on a bench where they could watch her. She's nothing like I expected, Claire said. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone quieter, maybe more damaged by loss. Luke watched Sophie climb the monkey bars, determined and fearless. She was only 3 when Melissa left. She doesn't really remember her. Melissa didn't die. Luke was quiet for a long moment. No, she left. Said she couldn't do it anymore, the struggle, the cramped apartment, the constant worry about money. She married her college boyfriend 2 years ago. Lives in California now. Sends a card on Sophie's birthday sometimes. Luke, I'm so sorry. Don't be. Sophie and I were solid. We don't need anyone, Claire finished. Is that what you were going to say? Luke turned to look at her, struck by how the setting sun caught the gold flecks in her green eyes. It's safer that way. Safer maybe, but is it better? Before Luke could answer, Sophie called out from the swing set. Daddy, Ms. Claire, watch this. She jumped from the swing at its highest point, landing in the sand with a triumphant grin. Luke's heart stopped for a second. It always did when she pulled stunts like that, but he forced himself to smile and applaud. She's fearless, Claire observed. She gets that from her mother, Luke said, then caught himself. The good kind of fearless, I mean, the kind that sees possibility instead of danger. And you, what do you see? Luke looked at Claire. This woman who lived in a different stratosphere but was sitting on a park bench in his neighborhood pizza sauce, probably staining her expensive sweater watching his daughter play. I'm starting to see possibility, he admitted. Claire smiled and something shifted between them. Not dramatic. Just a quiet recognition of potential. As the sun began to set, Sophie ran back, throwing herself onto the bench between them. Can we do this again? She asked Claire. Sophie, Ms. Claire has a company to run. I'd love to, Claire said. If it's okay with you both. Sophie looked up at her father with those eyes that owned every piece of his heart. Please, Daddy. How could he say no to that? We'll see. Claire stood to leave, pulling out her phone to call her driver. Luke started to protest, to offer to drive her home, but she shook her head. This was perfect, she said. Thank you, both of you. Claire? Luke called as her car pulled up. She turned back. Next Saturday, there's a harvest festival at Sophie's school. Nothing fancy, just games and face painting and terrible coffee. If you're not busy, Claire's smile was radiant. What time, 10 o'clock. I'll be there. As the town car pulled away, Sophie slipped her hand into Luke's. I like her, Daddy. Yeah. She's sad like you sometimes, but she smiles, real smiles when she looks at us. Out of the mouths of babes, Luke thought. Come on, baby, time to get home. That week passed differently than usual. Luke found himself checking his phone more often, though Claire didn't text except once to confirm Saturday was still happening. But somehow knowing she was out there, knowing Saturday was coming, made the daily grind feel less grinding. The guys at the construction site noticed. You're humming, Tommy accused on Thursday. Since when do you hum? I don't hum. You're literally humming right now. Luke realized he was. Some tune Sophie had been singing that morning. He stopped immediately. This about that CEO? Tommy pressed. Jimmy saw you at Luigi's with her. Jimmy needs to mind his own business. So it is about her. Tommy grinned. Good for you, man. It's about time. It's not like that. She's just, we're friends. Maybe. I don't know. You don't know? Tommy laughed. Brother, that woman is worth like $1 billion and she's eating pizza in our neighborhood. That's not just friends. Luke wanted to argue, but the truth was, he didn't know what it was. Claire existed in a different universe. Yet when she'd sat in that booth laughing at Sophie's jokes and stealing extra garlic knots, she'd seemed to fit perfectly into their small life. Friday night, Sophie could barely contain her excitement about the Harvest Festival. She'd picked out her outfit, her favorite purple dress with the twirly skirt, and made Luke promise to let Claire paint her face. How do you know she can face paint? She has pretty hands, Sophie said, as if this explained everything. Pretty hands are good at art. Luke didn't follow the logic, but he'd learned not to question 6-year-old wisdom. Saturday morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical Seattle autumn weather. Luke worried Claire might cancel. Surely she had better things to do than stand in a muddy school field in the rain. But at 9:45, his phone buzzed. "On my way. Do I need to bring anything?" "Just yourself, Fit," he texted back, then added, "and maybe rain boots if you have them." Bold of you to assume I own rain boots. Despite himself, Luke smiled. He could almost hear her tone through the text, that mix of self-deprecation and humor he was beginning to recognize. They arrived at the school to find the festival in full swing despite the weather. Sophie immediately spotted her friends and started to run off, then remembered Claire was coming and forced herself to wait, bouncing impatiently. "She'll be here, baby," Luke assured her. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, Claire appeared and Luke had to laugh. She was wearing designer rain boots that probably cost more than his monthly rent, a rain jacket that looked like it had never seen actual rain, and a smile that suggested she knew exactly how out of place she looked. "I may have had to buy these this morning," she admitted, gesturing to the boots. "They're perfect," Sophie declared, grabbing Claire's hand. "Come on." They have a duck pond game and face painting, and Ms. Rodriguez is making balloon animals. Claire let herself be pulled along, throwing Luke an amused glance over her shoulder. He followed, trying to ignore the looks from other parents. He could practically hear their thoughts. What was Luke Bennett doing with Claire Whitman? But Claire seemed oblivious to the attention, or maybe just used to it. She threw rings at the duck pond game with terrible aim but infectious enthusiasm. She let Sophie lead her from booth to booth, buying raffle tickets they'd never win and eating cotton candy that turned their tongues blue. At the face painting station, Sophie insisted Claire paint her face. "A butterfly," she requested. "A rainbow butterfly." Claire looked panicked. "Sophie, I don't know how to—" "I'll walk you through it," offered the mom running the booth, who Luke recognized as Ashley, one of the PTA regulars who usually looked right through him. But Claire sat down, took the brush, and with careful concentration began painting Sophie's face. Her tongue poked out slightly as she focused, and Luke found himself staring at the way she bit her lower lip when she was trying to get a line just right. The butterfly was lopsided, and the rainbow looked more like a bruise, but Sophie declared it perfect. "Now, Daddy," Sophie announced. "Oh no, please." Sophie deployed her most effective weapon, puppy dog eyes. Luke found himself sitting in a tiny plastic chair while Claire painted what was supposed to be a tiger on his face. Her fingers were gentle as she held his chin steady, and she was close enough that he could smell her perfume mixed with cotton candy and rain. "Stop moving," she murmured, her breath warm against his cheek. "I'm not moving. You're trying not to laugh. Your tiger looks like a sick cat. Excuse me, this is a masterpiece." She added another stripe, her finger accidentally brushing his jaw. "There. Perfect." Sophie giggled at the result. "Daddy, you look silly." "Your turn," Luke said to Claire. "Oh, I don't think—" But Sophie was already pushing her into the chair. "Daddy's really good at art. He draws with me all the time." Luke picked up the brush, acutely aware of the role reversal. Claire sat perfectly still as he painted small flowers along her cheekbone. Nothing elaborate, just simple daisies that somehow suited her more than the diamonds she probably usually wore. "Beautiful," Sophie breathed. Claire pulled out her phone to look, and her expression softened. "Luke, these are actually good." "I had a lot of practice." Sophie went through a face painting phase when she was 4. Every day was a new animal. They wandered the festival for another hour, Claire somehow ending up carrying Sophie on her shoulders, when the little girl got tired. It should have looked ridiculous, this elegant woman in expensive boots with a 6-year-old on her shoulders, both of them with painted faces. Instead, it looked like something Luke wanted to photograph to hold on to. As they were leaving, Mrs. Chen appeared. Luke and Ms. Whitman, what a surprise. Luke could hear the questions in her tone, the gossip that would spread through the school by Monday. But Claire handled it smoothly, shaking Mrs. Chen's hand and complimenting the festival organization. "Sophie talks about you all the time," Claire said. "She says you're the best teacher in the whole school." Mrs. Chen melted under the attention, and soon they were discussing the school's funding needs. Before Luke knew what was happening, Claire had committed to sponsoring new playground equipment. "You don't have to do that," Luke said as they walked to the parking lot. I want to. Sophie loves this school. Why shouldn't I help? Because people will think it. Let them think what they want. Claire's voice was firm. I spent my whole life worrying about what people think. It's exhausting and pointless. Sophie had run ahead to their truck, but Claire stopped walking, turning to face Luke in the drizzle. I have a confession, she said. Luke's stomach tightened. Okay. I've been having my assistant clear my Saturday mornings. Why? Because I'm hoping there will be more of them, more festivals and pizza and terrible face painting. She paused. More of this. Luke's heart was doing something complicated in his chest. Claire, I know we're from different worlds. I know it doesn't make sense on paper, but when I'm with you and Sophie, I feel more like myself than I have in years, maybe ever. You barely know us. I know enough. I know you're a good man who works hard and loves his daughter more than anything. I know Sophie is smart and funny and brave. I know that when I'm with you both, I remember why I worked so hard, not for the money or the power, but for the chance to build something real. Luke wanted to reach for her to close the distance between them, but Sophie's voice called out from the truck. Daddy, Ms. Claire, it's starting to rain harder. The moment broke, but Claire smiled. Can I see you next week? Sophie has a school play Thursday evening. Nothing big, just the first graders singing about vegetables. I wouldn't miss it. As Claire walked to her car, Sophie's voice piped up from the truck. Daddy, are you going to marry Ms. Claire? What? No, baby. Why would you ask that? Because you look at her the way you look at Mom's picture sometimes, like you're seeing something beautiful and sad at the same time. Luke didn't know how to respond to that, so he focused on buckling Sophie into her booster seat. But as they drove home, Claire's car following them part of the way before turning toward downtown, he couldn't stop thinking about what Sophie had said. He did look at Claire that way, seeing all the possibility and all the reasons it could never work. She was beautiful, yes, but there was a sadness to her, a loneliness that matched his own. The question was whether two lonely people could build something together or whether they'd just end up lonelier. That night after Sophie was asleep, Luke stood on their small balcony despite the rain. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire, a selfie of her with the painted daisies still on her cheek. Sophie was right. You are good at art. He found himself smiling, typing back, You should see my tiger. It's finally starting to look less like a sick cat. I had fun today. So did we. There was a pause, then another message. I'm scared, Luke. He stared at the words, surprised by her honesty. Of what? Of wanting something I don't know how to have, of ruining something perfect by trying to make it more. Luke understood. God, did he understand? Sophie asked if I was going to marry you today. What did you tell her, Saul? Change the subject, but she sees things pretty clearly for a 6-year-old. What does she see? Luke hesitated, then typed the truth. That I look at you like I'm seeing something beautiful. The dots that showed she was typing appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, Thursday, vegetables. I'll be there. Good night, Claire. Good night, Luke. He stayed on the balcony despite the rain, thinking about wounded hearts and second chances, about the courage it took to reach across the divide between different worlds. Somewhere across the city, Claire was probably standing at her own window, looking at the same rain, feeling the same pull towards something that made no sense, except in the moments when they were together. The week crawled by. Luke threw himself into work, trying not to count the days until Thursday. But Sophie talked about Claire constantly, what she might wear to the play, whether she'd like Sophie's vegetable costume. She was a carrot, whether she could sit with them instead of in the back with the other guests. Wednesday night, Luke's phone rang. Claire. Hey. He answered immediately, worried. Everything okay? Yes. Sorry, I know it's late. I wanted to ask what Sophie would like me to bring tomorrow. Flowers? Do 6-year-olds like flowers? Luke smiled at the nervousness in her voice. She'd love flowers, but you don't have to. I want to. What's her favorite color? Purple. Everything purple. Purple flowers, got it. And Luke, what about you? What about me? What's your favorite? I don't need flowers, Claire. That wasn't the question. Luke thought about it. When was the last time anyone had asked him his favorite anything blue? Those small blue wildflowers that grow by the highway. Forget-me-nots, I guess. Perfect. See you tomorrow. She hung up before he could protest that he really didn't need flowers. Thursday evening, the elementary school auditorium was packed with parents armed with cameras and grandparents who'd driven from out of state. Luke had saved 2 seats, which earned him glares from other parents, but he held firm. Claire arrived just as the lights were dimming, slipping in beside him with an enormous bouquet of purple roses for Sophie, and tucked discreetly beside them a small bundle of forget-me-nots. "You didn't have to—" "Shh," she whispered. "It's starting." The first graders filed onto stage in their vegetable costumes. Sophie stood tall in her carrot outfit, scanning the audience until she found them. Her face lit up when she saw Claire waving enthusiastically despite her teacher's attempts to maintain order. The play was objectively terrible. Kids forgot their lines. The tomato's costume fell apart halfway through, and the broccoli threw up just off stage. But Claire watched with the same intensity she probably brought to board meetings, recording Sophie's big moment a solo about the importance of vitamins. When it ended, Sophie rushed off stage and straight to them, ignoring the teacher calling for class photos. "You came," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Claire's waist. "Of course I came. You were amazing. Did you see when I almost forgot my line, but then remembered you handled it like a professional?" Sophie beamed, then noticed the flowers. "Are those for me?" "All for you, superstar." Sophie clutched the roses like they were made of gold. "No one ever brought me flowers before." Daddy looked purple. Other parents were staring now, recognizing Claire from the business section of the newspaper or the evening news. Luke could hear whispers starting to see phones coming out for subtle photos. "We should go," he said quietly. Claire nodded, understanding immediately. "Sophie, would you like to celebrate ice cream?" "Can we, Daddy?" How could he say no to that face? "Sure, baby." They went to a small ice cream shop near their apartment. Sophie still in her carrot costume because she refused to take it off. Claire helped her choose 2 scoops of strawberry with rainbow sprinkles, while Luke ordered vanilla, predictable and safe. Boring. Claire accused ordering something called Midnight Chocolate Chaos. They sat outside despite the cool evening, Sophie between them chattering about the play and school and everything that popped into her head. Claire listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Sophie's jokes. "Ms. Claire," Sophie asked suddenly, "do you have any kids?" Luke tensed, but Claire answered easily. "No, I don't." "Do you want some—" "Sophie," Luke started. "I think I'd like that someday," Claire said softly. "With the right person." "Daddy would be a good person," Sophie announced, then went back to her ice cream as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb. Luke's face burned. "Sophie, what?" "It's true. You're the best daddy. Ms. Claire should know that if she wants kids." Claire met Luke's eyes over Sophie's head, a small smile playing at her lips. "Good to know." They finished their ice cream in comfortable silence, Sophie starting to droop against Luke's shoulder as the sugar crash hit. Claire reached over and brushed a strand of hair from Sophie's face, the gesture so natural and tender that Luke's chest ached. "I should get her home," he said quietly. "Of course." Luke picked up Sophie, who wrapped her arms around his neck, half asleep. Claire walked with them to the truck carrying Sophie's flowers and backpack. As Luke buckled Sophie in, Claire stood by the driver's door, forget-me-not still in her hand. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me be part of this. Thank you for coming." "Luke," her voice was hesitant, "my company is having a gala next Friday. Black tie, fancy food, boring speeches. I know it's not your thing, but would you come with me?" Luke's first instinct was to say no. That wasn't his world. He didn't own a tux, didn't know which fork to use, didn't belong in rooms full of billionaires. But Claire was looking at him with those green eyes, holding forget-me-nots he'd mentioned once, and she'd just spent her evening watching terrible first-grade theater like it was Broadway. "I don't have anything to wear to something like that." "That's a yes." "It's a maybe." "I'll take a maybe." She handed him the forget-me-nots. "These are for you, by the way, so you don't forget." "Forget what?" "That someone asked about your favorites, that someone wanted to know." Before Luke could respond, she was walking to her car. He stood there holding the small blue flowers, watching her drive away, wondering how his carefully constructed walls had crumbled so quickly. "Daddy?" Sophie's sleepy voice came from the truck. "Are you happy?" Luke looked at his daughter, at the purple roses filling the cab with their sweet scent, at the forget-me-nots in his hand. "Yeah, baby, I think I am." And for the first time in 3 years, he meant it. The forget-me-not sat in a mason jar on Luke's kitchen counter, a splash of blue against the faded linoleum. 3 days had passed since the play, and he still hadn't given Claire an answer about the gala. Every time he picked up his phone to text her, doubt crept in. What business did he have at a black tie event? He'd probably use the wrong fork or say something wrong and embarrass her in front of people who mattered to her world. "Daddy, why do you keep looking at those flowers?" Sophie asked over breakfast Friday morning. "Just thinking, baby." "About Miss Claire." Luke nodded, not seeing the point in denying it. Sophie had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when his thoughts drifted to Claire. "You should call her," Sophie said matter-of-factly, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "You're grumpy when you don't talk to her." "I'm not grumpy. You burned my eggs yesterday. You never burn my eggs unless you're thinking too hard." Out-reasoned by a 6-year-old. Luke's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "Heard about the gala. You going, or are you going to be an idiot?" How did Tommy even know about it? Luke texted back, "How? Claire called me, asked what would convince you to go, told her you're stubborn as hell but not stupid. Don't make me a liar." Luke stared at his phone. Claire had called Tommy. She was really going to these lengths just to get him to a party. Another text this time from Claire herself. "No pressure about Friday, but if it helps, I've already scared off 3 board members this week because I'd rather be eating pizza with you and Sophie than sitting through investment meetings." Before he could overthink it, Luke typed, "What time Friday?" Her response was immediate, "Really, you'll come. If you can handle me using the wrong fork." "Luke Bennett, you could eat with your hands and still be the most interesting person in the room. Pick you up at 7. "I can drive myself." "Not a chance. If I'm dragging you into my world, I'm doing it properly. 7 o'clock. Wear whatever you're comfortable in." Luke looked at his work clothes splattered with concrete and dust. Somehow, he didn't think that's what she meant. That afternoon during lunch break, Luke found himself at a mall for the first time in years. The suit section of the department store might as well have been a foreign country. Everything either looked too cheap or cost more than he made in a month. "Can I help you?" A sales associate appeared, taking in Luke's work boots and rough hands with barely concealed judgment. "I need something for a formal event." "Rental section is on the 2nd floor." Luke felt heat rise in his face, but headed upstairs anyway. The rental place was better, less judgment, more practical. He found a basic black tuxedo that mostly fit, though the sleeves were a bit short. It would have to do. "Special occasion?" the clerk asked while ringing him up. "Something like that." Lucky lady. Luke thought about Claire, about the way she'd looked holding Sophie's hand at the festival, paint on her face and rain in her hair. "I'm the lucky one." Friday arrived too quickly. Luke had arranged for Sophie to have a sleepover at Katie's house, her first one ever. She was so excited about that, she barely noticed his nervousness about the gala. "You look handsome, Daddy," she said as he adjusted the bow tie for the 10th time. "Like James Bond." "James Bond doesn't usually have calloused hands and a farmer's tan." "Miss Claire likes your hands. She told me they're hero hands." "When did she tell you that?" "When you were getting ice cream. She said they're strong and gentle and they saved her life." Sophie hugged him tight. "I hope you dance with her tonight." "It's probably not that kind of party, baby." But Sophie just smiled like she knew something he didn't. At exactly 7, a sleek black town car pulled up outside their building. Luke's neighbors were definitely going to have questions. He kissed Sophie goodbye, reminded Katie's mom about Sophie's bedtime routine and her need to sleep with Mr. Hoppy, then headed downstairs. The driver opened the door, and Luke's breath caught. Claire was already inside, and she was stunning. Her dress was midnight blue, elegant and simple, with diamonds at her throat that probably cost more than his truck. But it was her smile when she saw him that made his heart race. "You came," she said softly. "You sent Tommy after me. That's playing dirty." I played a win, remember? But her hand found his as he sat beside her, and he realized she was trembling slightly. I'm nervous. You own half the people who will be there. That's different. This is personal. I've never brought anyone to one of these things before. Never. There were dates sometimes arranged by publicists or mutual business interests, but never someone I actually wanted there. She squeezed his hand. Thank you for doing this. The hotel ballroom was exactly what Luke had feared: crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, and people who looked like they'd been born in formal wear. He felt every eye turn as they entered together, heard the whispers start immediately. Is that Claire Whitman with... Who is that? He looks familiar. Is he in tech? Those hands. He actually works for a living. Claire either didn't hear or didn't care. She kept her hand in his, introducing him simply as Luke Bennett, my friend, to anyone who approached. She didn't mention his job or explain his presence, and after a while Luke realized she was protecting him from their curiosity. Claire, a woman in a red dress that looked painted on, approached with air kisses. Darling, you look divine. And who's this? Luke, this is Victoria Hamilton. She runs the Hamilton Foundation. Victoria Luke Bennett. Victoria's eyes swept over Luke with the kind of assessment that probably worked on spreadsheets but felt wrong applied to people. Bennett? I don't recognize the name. What do you do, Luke? Construction, Luke said simply. Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. How refreshing. Claire always did like her little projects. Claire's hand tightened on Luke's arm. Luke isn't a project, Victoria. He's the man who saved my life 2 weeks ago. You remember the bridge accident you sent that tasteless flower arrangement for? Victoria's face went through several expressions before settling on false sweetness. Of course, how heroic. After she left, Claire whispered, I'm sorry, she's awful. She's right, though. I don't belong here. Claire stopped walking, turning to face him fully. You belong wherever you want to be, and right now I hope that's with me. The dinner was 8 courses of food Luke couldn't identify, served on plates that looked more like art than dinnerware. He watched Claire for cues on which fork to use, but she caught him looking and deliberately picked up the wrong one, winking at him. The salad fork police aren't real, she whispered, making him laugh, and earn more stares from their table companions. During the speeches, endless droning about quarterly projections and market synergy, Claire leaned close, her breath warm against his ear, as she provided commentary. That's Richard Blackstone. He's having an affair with his assistant, and everyone knows it except his wife. Or maybe she knows and doesn't care because she's sleeping with her trainer. Claire. What? You didn't think rich people were actually listening to these speeches, did you? We're all just gossiping with better vocabulary. And that one, Luke nodded toward a stern-looking man at the podium. Marcus Webb tried to buy my company last year. I told him I'd rather sell to a kindergarten class. They'd probably make better decisions. You didn't. I did. He sent me a box of crayons the next day. I had to respect that. Luke found himself relaxing, seeing these intimidating people through Claire's eyes, flawed, petty human despite their wealth. When the band started playing and couples moved to the dance floor, Claire stood, extending her hand. Dance with me. I don't really know how. Neither do I. That's what makes it fun. She led him onto the floor, and suddenly they were moving together to something slow and classic. Claire's hand was warm in his, her other hand resting on his shoulder, and she was close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that made him think of moonlight. People are staring, Luke murmured. Let them. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw vulnerability that all her money couldn't shield. I've spent years being exactly what they expected. The Ice Queen CEO. The ruthless negotiator. The untouchable success story. But with you, I get to be just Claire. Just Claire is pretty amazing. She missed a step and he caught her easily, his hand steadying her waist. Careful, he said softly. Too late, she whispered back, and he knew she wasn't talking about dancing. They were interrupted by James Claire's assistant, who looked apologetic but firm. Ms. Whitman, the Jensen investors are here. You wanted to speak with them about the waterfront project. Claire's professional mask slipped back on, though her hand lingered in Luke's. 5 minutes, she promised him. There's a balcony through those doors. It's quieter out there. Luke watched her work the room, transforming into the CEO everyone expected. She was magnificent, commanding, articulate, making million-dollar decisions between sips of champagne. But he also saw the way her eyes searched for him, the small smile when she caught him watching. He stepped out onto the balcony, grateful for the cool air and relative quiet. The city sparkled below, and he thought about Sophie probably giggling with Katie over some secret 6-year-olds found hilarious. This was surreal, him in a rented tux at a party where the champagne cost more than his weekly groceries, falling for a woman who could buy and sell small countries. Enjoying the view, Luke turned to find a man he recognized from the business news, David Chen, some kind of tech mogul who'd been linked to Claire in the gossip columns last year. "It's something," Luke said carefully. David moved to stand beside him, his posture casual but his eyes sharp. "You're the construction worker who saved her." "Just happened to be there." "Right place, right time." David's smile was cold. "Let me give you some friendly advice. Claire Whitman collects broken things. She fixes them, makes them shiny and new, then moves on when she gets bored. It's what she does with companies. It's what she does with people. Thanks for the concern, but I can take care of myself." Can your daughter?" David's tone turned harder. "You think you're the first project she's taken on. The first person she's tried to save. I watched her do this with a starving artist 2 years ago. Set him up in a studio, bought all his paintings, introduced him to galleries. Then one day she realized he was just another acquisition, not a real connection, and it ended badly." Luke's hands clenched into fists. "You don't know anything about—" "I know she's already setting up that foundation in your name, already planning to change your life. But what happens when she realizes she can't make you into something you're not? When she gets tired of playing house in your small apartment?" Before Luke could respond, Claire's voice cut through the night air. "David, I didn't realize you were here." She moved to Luke's side, her hand sliding into his with practiced ease. But Luke could feel the tension in her body, see the ice in her eyes as she faced David. "Just catching up with your new friend," David said smoothly. "He seems different from your usual type." "Yes," Claire agreed. "He's genuine. That must be confusing for you." David's laugh was bitter. "Enjoy the fairy tale, Claire, but we both know how those end in our world." After he left, Claire turned to Luke, her face anxious. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing important." "Luke, do you collect broken things?" The question hung between them. Claire's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "Is that what he told you, that you're some kind of project?" She pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. "David's bitter because I ended things when I found out he was stealing proprietary information from my company. He's been trying to hurt me ever since." "But was there an artist?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "Yes, Marcus. He was talented but destroying himself with drugs and alcohol. I thought I could help. I set him up with everything he needed to succeed, but I couldn't fix what was broken inside him. He overdosed 6 months later." "Claire, I don't collect broken things, Luke. If anything, I'm the broken one. I've been alone so long I don't know how to be anything else. But with you and Sophie," she trailed off, looking out at the city lights. "With you I don't feel broken. I feel possible." Luke moved closer, his hand covering hers on the railing. "We're not a project." "No," she agreed. "You're the first real thing in my life in years." She turned to face him fully. "I'm falling for you, Luke. For both of you, and it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this. I know how to run a company, how to make deals, how to win, but I don't know how to be part of something without trying to control it. You're doing fine so far. Am I because I researched you before we'd even met? I created a foundation to keep you close. I'm here in a dress that cost more than you make in 6 months, asking you to fit into a world that judges you for having calluses on your hands. And I'm here in a rented tux that's too short in the sleeves, falling for a woman who could have anyone but chooses to eat pizza with my daughter and paint butterflies on her face." Claire laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" "Sophie would say we're perfect." Sophie's 6. Sometimes 6-year-olds see things clearer than adults. Claire moved closer, and Luke's hand found her waist, drawing her against him. The city noise faded away. There was just Claire looking up at him with those green eyes that had haunted him since he'd pulled her from that car. "Luke," she whispered. He kissed her, then soft and careful, like she was something precious that might shatter. She made a small sound against his mouth, her hands coming up to frame his face, and suddenly the kiss deepened, became something desperate and necessary. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Claire rested her forehead against his chest. "This is going to be complicated," she murmured. "Everything worth having usually is. Your daughter already loves you. The media will be vicious when they find out. I've faced worse. I work 18-hour days. I'm terrible at relationships. I don't know how to slow down." Luke tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. "Then maybe it's time you learned." Before Claire could respond, James appeared in the doorway, looking apologetic. "Ms. Whitman, the auction is starting. You're presenting the first item." Claire sighed. "The show must go on." She looked at Luke. "Come with me." "I should probably go. Sophie." "Is that a sleepover? Please, I know this isn't your scene, but I want you here." How could he refuse when she looked at him like that? They went back inside Claire's hand in his, ignoring the whispers that followed them. The auction was for one of Claire's pet charities, something about providing computers to underfunded schools. She took the stage with the confidence of someone born to command attention, but Luke saw the way her eyes found him in the crowd, drawing strength from his presence. "Before we begin," she said into the microphone, "I want to share something. 2 weeks ago, I was in a car accident. A beam fell on my vehicle during the bridge construction. By all accounts, I should have died." The room went silent, everyone leaning forward. "But a stranger, risked his life to pull me from that wreckage. He didn't know who I was. He didn't stay for thanks or reward. He just saved my life and went back to pick up his daughter from school." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Luke wanted to disappear into the floor. "That man is here tonight," Claire continued. "Luke Bennett. He's taught me something important, that the most valuable things in life can't be bought at auctions or negotiated in boardrooms. They're earned through kindness, integrity, and the courage to help others without expecting anything in return." She raised her champagne glass. "So before we bid on items tonight, I'm pledging to match every dollar raised in honor of the man who reminded me what really matters." The room erupted in applause. People were looking around trying to spot Luke, but Claire was already off the stage, moving through the crowd back to him. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did." She took his hand. "Can we leave? I know the auction just started, but—" "God, yes!" They practically ran out of the ballroom, Claire laughing as her heels clicked against the marble floor. In the car, she kicked off the expensive shoes and curled against his side, her head on his shoulder. "Where to?" the driver asked. Claire looked at Luke. "Your choice." "The marina. Sophie and I go there sometimes to watch the boats." The driver nodded and pulled away from the hotel. Claire was quiet during the drive, her fingers intertwined with Luke's, her breathing slow and steady against his neck. The marina was mostly empty at this hour, just a few late-night fishermen and couples walking along the docks. Luke led Claire to a bench where he and Sophie often sat with ice cream, watching the sailboats bob in the gentle waves. "This is perfect," Claire said, surprising him. "Quiet. Real. Not quite the gala. Better than the gala." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "Luke, what are we doing?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I can't stop thinking about you. I know Sophie lights up when you're around. I know that when you're with us, everything feels more." "I could hurt you," she said quietly. "Not intentionally, but I'm not good at this. At family. At normal. What if David's right? What if I'm just playing at something I can't really have?" "What if you're not?" Luke countered. "What if this is exactly what you're supposed to have?" Claire was quiet for a long moment, watching the boats. "I want to try," she finally said. "Really try. Not just dinners and festivals, but everything. Homework and sick days and grocery shopping and all the unglamorous parts of real life." "Claire, I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I've been careful my whole life. and all it got me was a beautiful prison of success. With you and Sophie, I feel free." Luke pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We'll take it slow. Figure it out as we go." "I'm not good at slow." "I'll teach you. Like you're teaching me about pizza and face painting." Exactly like that. They sat there until the marina security guard gently suggested they head home. In the car, Claire gave the driver Luke's address without being asked. "I should go home," she said. "But stay," Luke said simply. "Not for... just stay. Sophie won't be back until noon tomorrow." Claire looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. His apartment had never felt smaller than when Claire Whitman walked into it, still in her gala dress, with her shoes in her hand. She took in the cramped space, the toys scattered around Sophie's artwork covering every surface. "It's perfect," she said, and somehow Luke knew she meant it. He found her one of his t-shirts and a pair of sweatpants that would be huge on her, then made coffee while she changed. When she emerged from the bathroom, face washed clean of makeup, hair pulled back drowning in his clothes, she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "You look like you belong here." "I feel like I belong here." She accepted the coffee, gratefully wrapping her hands around the mug. "That terrifies me." They talked until dawn, curled together on his worn couch. Claire told him about her childhood, the loneliness of wealth parents who saw her as an investment, the pressure to be perfect. Luke told her about Afghanistan, about coming home to a pregnant wife who'd grown tired of waiting, about holding Sophie for the first time and knowing he'd never love anything more. "She saved me," Luke admitted. "After Melissa left, I was angry at everything. But Sophie needed me to be better, so I became better. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her." He paused. "And now maybe to have you too." Claire set down her coffee and shifted to face him fully. "I want to be part of your life, both your lives. But I need you to know what that means. The media attention will be insane when they find out. People will dig into your past, judge you, say terrible things. They'll go after Sophie too. We can handle it." "You say that now, Claire." Luke took her hands. "I've been shot at in Afghanistan. I've had my wife leave me for someone richer. I've worked 3 jobs to keep Sophie fed. Whatever the media throws at us, we've survived worse. What about Sophie? Sophie's tougher than both of us combined. Plus, she already informed me I should marry you, so I think she's on board." Claire laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "She said that right after the vegetable play. She's not subtle." "Neither is her father, apparently." Luke grinned. "I did tell you I was falling for you while wearing a too short rental tux. Subtlety isn't really my thing." As the sun rose over Seattle, painting the small apartment golden, they fell asleep on the couch, Claire tucked against Luke's chest, his arms around her like he was still pulling her from wreckage, still saving her, still choosing to help without expecting anything in return. When Luke woke, Claire was at the stove attempting to make breakfast. The smoke alarm was beeping and she was waving a dish towel at it, cursing creatively. "I wanted to surprise you," she said, frustrated. "But your stove is possessed, and I think I killed the eggs." Luke disconnected the alarm and surveyed the damaged blackened eggs, burnt toast, and what might have once been bacon. "It's perfect," he said, kissing her. "Terrible, but perfect." "How is that possible?" "Because you tried." They ended up having cereal on the balcony, Claire wearing his clothes and looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "I have a conference in Tokyo next week," she said quietly. 4 days. "Okay. You could come, both of you. I know Sophie has school, but Claire, you don't have to include us in everything." "But I want to." She set down her bowl, looking vulnerable. "Is that too much? Am I being too much?" "No," Luke said firmly. "You're being exactly enough." His phone buzzed, Katie's mom saying Sophie was ready to come home. Luke felt Claire tense beside him. "She's going to know you stayed over," Claire said. "Is that a problem?" "I don't know. Is it? I don't know the rules for this." "There aren't rules. We just do what feels right. Nothing about a billionaire dating a construction worker feels normal." "No," Luke agreed, "but it feels right." When Sophie burst through the door an hour later, she took one look at Claire and Luke's clothes and grinned. "Did you have a sleepover too?" She asked innocently. "Something like that," Claire said, blushing. "Good. Daddy doesn't have enough sleepovers. Katie's mom says he needs more adult friends. Sophie climbed onto the couch between them. Are you going to stay forever now? Sophie. Luke started. Not forever, Claire said carefully, but maybe more often. Every day? I have to work, sweetheart, but as often as I can. Sophie considered this. Okay, but you have to be here for movie nights and help with homework and come to my soccer games when I'm old enough to play soccer. Deal, Claire said solemnly, shaking Sophie's hand. As Sophie ran off to play, Claire looked at Luke. Is it really that simple? With Sophie, usually yes. And with you? Luke pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. We'll figure it out as we go, day by day. I can do days, Claire murmured against his chest. I can do all the days you'll give me. Outside, Seattle was waking up sirens and traffic, and the distant sound of construction. But inside the small apartment with Sophie singing in her room and Claire in his arms, Luke felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. They'd saved each other in different ways, and now they had the chance to build something new from the wreckage. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But as Claire reached up to kiss him, tasting like cereal, and promises Luke knew they'd found something worth fighting for. The week Claire was in Tokyo tested everything. Luke hadn't realized how quickly she'd become woven into their daily routine until she wasn't there. Sophie asked about her constantly when she was coming back, what Tokyo was like, whether they could call her. They did video calls each night, Claire looking exhausted, but lighting up when Sophie appeared on screen, showing her drawings and telling her about school. I miss you, Sophie said on the third night, and Claire's composure cracked slightly. I miss you too, sweetheart, both of you. When Luke took the phone after Sophie went to bed, Claire looked vulnerable in her hotel room, the Tokyo skyline glittering behind her. This is harder than I thought, she admitted. Being away. It's your job, Claire, we understand. Do you... Because I'm sitting in meetings worth millions, and all I can think about is Sophie's laugh and the way you take your coffee. 2 sugars, no cream. Not that complicated. Everything about you is complicated, she said softly. Complicated and perfect, and I can't stop thinking about you. The next morning, Luke was pulling into the construction site when his phone rang. The foreman. Don't come in today, Bennett. Luke's stomach dropped. Am I being let go? What? No. Jesus, no. Just, there are reporters here. Somehow they found out about you and Whitman. It's a circus. Luke sat in his truck watching the normal morning routine of his neighborhood people heading to work, kids walking to school. How had they found out? His phone buzzed with texts from Claire. I'm so sorry. Someone leaked it. Probably David. I'm handling it. Then another, don't talk to anyone, don't answer questions. I'll be home tonight. Home. She'd called it home, but Claire couldn't protect him from everything. When Luke picked up Sophie from school, Mrs. Chen pulled him aside. There were photographers outside during recess, she said quietly. We had to call the police. Some parents are concerned. About what? About the attention this is bringing to the school. About whether it's safe for the other children. Luke felt rage build in his chest. Sophie isn't a danger to anyone. Of course not. But you have to understand this is a small school. We're not equipped for this kind of scrutiny. What are you saying? Mrs. Chen looked uncomfortable. Maybe consider keeping Sophie home for a few days, until this dies down. Luke left without another word, Sophie's hand tight in his. She was quieter than usual, and he knew she'd noticed the cameras, the whispers. Daddy, why were those people taking pictures? It's complicated, baby. Is it because of Ms. Claire? He couldn't lie to her. Yes. Are we in trouble? No, sweetheart, never. But that night when Luke saw the headlines online, he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Billionaire's boy toy, one screamed. Another, gold digger dad. How a construction worker seduced Seattle's richest woman. There were photos him in his work clothes, looking rough and out of place. Claire and her designer, everything. The contrast was stark, the narrative obvious. His phone rang. Claire. I'm at the airport, she said without preamble. I'm coming home. Claire, you have meetings. Fuck the meetings. It was the first time he'd heard her truly angry. They're going after you, after Sophie. I'm coming home. We're okay. No, you're not. I know what this feels like, Luke. The invasion, the judgment. I won't let them do this to you. 4 hours later, she was at his door, still in her business clothes from Tokyo, looking exhausted but determined. Sophie launched herself into Claire's arms. You came back. Of course I did. Claire held her tight, meeting Luke's eyes over Sophie's head. I'll always come back. After Sophie was in bed, Claire paced Luke's small living room like a caged animal. I'll hold a press conference. Make a statement. Claire, stop. She whirled on him. They're calling you a gold digger. They're harassing Sophie's school. How are you so calm? Because I knew this would happen. Luke caught her hand, stilling her movement. You warned me. I chose this anyway. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you choose this mess? You know why. Claire collapsed against him, all her CEO armor falling away. I'm going to fix this. You can't fix everything. Watch me. The next morning, Claire Whitman did something unprecedented. She invited 3 major news outlets to Luke's construction site. She stood in a hard hat and safety vest, surrounded by Luke's co-workers, and gave the interview of her career. You want a story? She said to the cameras. Here it is. Luke Bennett saved my life. Not because he knew who I was or what I was worth, but because he saw someone who needed help. That's who he is, a man who works hard, raises his daughter with love and integrity, and helps others without expecting anything in return. A reporter shouted, Are you confirming the relationship? Claire looked directly at the camera. I'm confirming that I'm in love with him. I'm confirming that his 6-year-old daughter is the brightest light in my life. And I'm confirming that anyone who has a problem with that can deal with me directly. Ms. Whitman, what about the difference in your economic backgrounds? Claire laughed, but it was sharp. You mean the fact that Luke works for a living while I inherited my starter capital? The fact that his hands build things while mine just sign papers? If anyone should be embarrassed by the economic difference, it's me. She turned to include the construction crew in the shot. These men and women build our city. They create homes, offices, the very foundations we stand on. Luke Bennett represents everything that's right about hard work and honest living. If you want to attack someone for loving him, attack me. But leave him and his daughter out of it. Luke watched from behind the cameras, his chest tight with emotion. His coworkers were grinning, some even applauding. Tommy slapped him on the back. Damn, Bennett, she just told the entire world to fuck off for you. After the cameras left, Claire found Luke by his truck. Her bravado had faded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Was that okay? She asked uncertainly. I didn't mean to make it worse. Luke pulled her against him, not caring who saw. It was perfect. You're perfect. I'm really not. Perfect for us, then. The media storm intensified for a few days, but Claire's fierce defense had shifted the narrative. Stories emerged about the Second Chances Fund, about the families Luke's suggestion had helped. Several of his co-workers gave interviews about what kind of man he really was. Even Mrs. Chen called to apologize, saying Sophie was welcome back anytime. But the real test came the following Saturday. Claire had invited them to her penthouse for the first time. Sophie was excited beyond words, chattering non-stop during the drive. Do you think she has a pool? Katie's rich aunt has a pool. I don't know, baby. What about a movie theater, like a real one inside her house? We'll see. The doorman knew their names, which felt surreal. The private elevator to the penthouse made Sophie gasp with delight. But when the doors opened directly into Claire's apartment, even Luke had to catch his breath. The space was massive, all windows and modern art with views that stretched across the entire city. Everything was white and chrome and spotless, the exact opposite of their cluttered apartment. Wow, Sophie whispered, suddenly shy. Claire appeared from what must be the kitchen, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, her feet bare. Welcome, I'm so nervous. I have people over for business, but not family. Family. The word hung in the air like a promise. Can I explore? Sophie asked. Of course, your dad and I will be in the kitchen. Sophie ran off and Luke followed Claire into a kitchen bigger than his entire apartment. She was attempting to make cookies flour everywhere, looking adorably flustered. Sophie mentioned she loves chocolate chip cookies, so I thought. She gestured helplessly at the mess. I don't actually know how to bake. You have a kitchen this beautiful and you don't cook. I have a service. They deliver meals. Or I eat at the office. She looked embarrassed. I'm failing at this already. Luke moved behind her, looking at the recipe she had pulled up on her tablet. You're not failing. You're learning. Here the butter needs to be room temperature. They baked together. Luke teaching her the basics his grandmother had taught him. Claire laughing when she cracked an egg wrong and got shell in the bowl. Sophie joined them, and soon all three were covered in flour, the pristine kitchen a disaster zone. This is the best day, Sophie declared, eating raw cookie dough despite Luke's protests about salmonella. When the cookies were in the oven, Claire showed them around. The penthouse was beautiful but cold like a museum, until they reached one room that made Sophie squeal. You got me a room? Luke looked inside. It was clearly newly decorated purple, everything a reading nook, like the one in their apartment Sophie's artwork from school framed on the walls. It's not, just for when you visit, Claire said quickly, looking at Luke anxiously. I didn't mean to presume. It's perfect, Sophie interrupted, throwing her arms around Claire. Can I really stay here sometimes? Anytime you want. Luke watched them together, Sophie chattering about where she'd put her stuffed animals. Claire listening intently and felt something shift in his chest. This could work. Despite everything, the media, the money, the different worlds, this could actually work. That evening became a routine. Saturdays at Claire's, where Sophie had claimed her purple room, and Luke had learned to navigate the intimidating coffee machine. Weeknights at Luke's apartment, where Claire learned to help with first-grade homework and became an expert at voices during bedtime stories. The media attention faded to background noise. There were still photographers, sometimes still whispers at school pickup, but life found a rhythm. Until the day Melissa called. Luke was at work when his phone rang with a number he'd deleted but still recognized. Hello, Luke. Her voice was exactly the same cultured, careful cold. Melissa, I see you've been in the news. You and the Whitman woman. What do you want? To see my daughter. Luke's blood went cold. She's not. You gave up that right when you walked out. I never gave up my parental rights legally. I've been discussing it with my lawyer. Why now it's been 3 years? Because now I see she's being exposed to an inappropriate lifestyle, a revolving door of your girlfriend's media attention, instability. That's not. I'll see you in court, Luke. My husband and I can provide Sophie with a proper home, private schools, opportunities, everything you can't give her even with your rich girlfriend's charity. She hung up. Luke stood in the construction site, his hand shaking, the phone creaking under his grip. Tommy found him 10 minutes later, still frozen. Hey man, you okay? Melissa wants custody of Sophie. What? She can't. She can. She never signed away her rights, just left. Luke's voice was hollow. And now with all the media attention Claire being in our lives, she says it's an unstable environment. That's bullshit. Is it? Sophie was chased by photographers. Parents at school complain. I'm in the tabloids as a gold digger. What judge is going to think that's better than a stable home in California with 2 parents and money? That night, Luke told Claire. She went very still, her face pale. This is my fault. No, it is. The media attention, the chaos. I brought this into your life. She stood pacing. I'll get you the best lawyer. We'll fight this. With your money. Claire stopped. Is that a problem? How's it going to look when I show up to family court with girlfriend's lawyers, like I'm exactly what Melissa says, dependent on your charity? So what, you're just going to give up? I'm going to fight, but I have to do it my way. Your way. Claire's voice rose. Your proud, stubborn, do-it-alone way. This is Sophie we're talking about. You think I don't know that? Luke shouted back. She's everything to me. Then let me help. I can't. Don't you see using your money, your lawyers proves Melissa's point, that I can't provide for Sophie on my own? Claire stared at him. You'd rather lose her than accept my help? I won't lose her. You might. Tears were streaming down Claire's face. God, Luke, you might actually lose her because you're too proud to let someone love you enough to help. She left and Luke didn't stop her. He sat in his dark apartment, Sophie asleep down the hall, and wondered if he'd just lost everything. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Luke found a lawyer he could afford decent, but not the shark Melissa would have. He gathered character witnesses, documented his years as a single parent, prepared everything he could. Claire didn't call, neither did he. Sophie asked about her constantly, and Luke made excuses, work trips, important meetings. But Sophie was too smart for that. "You fought," she said one night as Luke tucked her in. "You and Miss Claire. It's complicated, baby." "Is it because of my real mom?" Luke's heart stopped. "You know about that? Katie heard her mom talking. My real mom wants me to live with her." Sophie's voice was very small. "Do I have to?" "No, baby, never. I won't let that happen." "But what if the judge says yes?" Luke held her tight, feeling her trembling. "Then I'll keep fighting, forever if I have to." "I want Ms. Claire," Sophie whispered. "She makes you happy, and she loves us." "I know, sweetheart. Then why did you let her go?" Luke didn't have an answer for that. The night before the hearing, Luke sat at his kitchen table reviewing his papers for the 100th time. His case looked thin compared to what Melissa would present. Stable marriage, big house, private schools, no media circuses. A knock at the door interrupted his spiral. He opened it to find Claire, but not the polished CEO he was used to. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed, wearing an old sweatshirt and jeans. "I know you don't want my help," she said quickly, "but I need to say something." Luke stepped aside, letting her in. She stood in his kitchen looking at the legal papers spread across the table. "I was wrong," she said. "Not about offering help, but about how I did it. I defaulted to throwing money at the problem because that's all I know, but that's not what you need." "Claire, let me finish. You're the strongest person I know. You've raised Sophie alone, working yourself to the bone, never complaining, never taking shortcuts. You don't need my money. But Luke," her voice broke, "you do need someone in your corner, someone to hold your hand in that courtroom, someone to remind you that you're a wonderful father when Melissa tries to tear you down." "I can't. I'm not offering money. I'm not offering lawyers. I'm offering to sit beside you tomorrow. To be there when Sophie needs to see familiar faces who love her. To tell the judge, if asked, that I've never seen a father more devoted, more capable, more deserving of his daughter." Luke felt his walls crumbling. "What if we lose? Then we face it together." "But Luke, you won't lose. Not because of money or lawyers, but because Sophie belongs with you. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you two can see that." Claire stepped closer. "I know I have no right to insert myself into this. Sophie isn't mine, but I love her, and I love you. And if you'll let me, I want to stand with you tomorrow. Not as CEO Claire Whitman with her checkbook, but just as Claire, the woman who loves your family and wants to be part of it." Luke pulled her into his arms, feeling 3 weeks of tension and fear finally break. "I'm sorry. I was so scared of proving Melissa right, of being seen as dependent on you. You could never be that. You're the most independent, self-sufficient person I know. It drives me crazy and makes me love you more." She pulled back to look at him. "Let me stand with you tomorrow, please." "Yes." Sophie appeared in the hallway, Mr. Hoppy in her arms. "Miss Claire." "Hi, sweetheart." Sophie ran to her and Claire caught her, lifting her up. "Are you staying?" "If it's okay with you and your dad." "Forever." Claire looked at Luke over Sophie's head. "I'd like that." The courthouse was intimidating, all marble and echoing footsteps. Luke wore his only suit, the one from his wedding, that still mostly fit. Claire sat beside him, her hand in his, while Sophie waited in the children's room with a social worker. Melissa arrived with her husband and a team of lawyers. She looked exactly the same, polished, beautiful, cold. Her eyes skimmed over Luke dismissively before landing on Claire with calculating interest. The hearing was worse than Luke expected. Melissa's lawyers painted a picture of instability. Luke's long work hours, the tiny apartment, Sophie being late to school programs, the recent media attention putting Sophie at risk. "Mr. Bennett means well," Melissa's lawyer said smoothly, "but meaning well isn't enough. Sophie deserves better than a construction worker's salary and a 2-bedroom apartment. She deserves the opportunities my client can provide." Luke's lawyer did his best, but he was outmatched. Character witnesses from the construction site and Sophie's school helped, but Melissa's team twisted everything. Even Tommy's testimony about Luke's devotion got turned into evidence of Sophie spending too much time at other people's houses. Then the judge asked if there was anyone else who wanted to speak. Claire stood. "Your Honor, I'm Claire Whitman. I'm Luke's partner." Melissa's lawyer immediately objected. "Your Honor, Ms. Whitman has no legal standing. But she's been mentioned extensively in your arguments," the judge noted. "I'll hear her." Claire moved to the witness chair with CEO confidence, but when she spoke, her voice was soft, personal. "I met Luke when he saved my life. He pulled me from a car accident, risked everything for a stranger, then walked away without wanting recognition or reward. That tells you who he is. But what really tells you about Luke Bennett is what I've witnessed since then." She looked directly at the judge. "I've seen him work 16-hour days and still have energy to help Sophie with homework. I've seen him skip meals so she can have new shoes. I've seen him turn down a fortune from me because he wanted to earn everything himself to show his daughter that integrity matters more than money." "Ms. Whitman," Melissa's lawyer interrupted, "aren't you the reason Sophie has been harassed by media?" "Yes," Claire said simply, "and it's my deepest regret. But you know what? Luke handled it. He protected Sophie, talked to her about it, made sure she understood. He didn't hide from hard conversations or farm them out to nannies. He faced them like he faces everything with courage and love." She turned to Melissa. "You talk about opportunities, private schools, big houses. I have all of that. My parents gave me every opportunity money could buy. And I would trade it all for one day of what Sophie has: a father who reads her stories with different voices, who knows her favorite color changes weekly, but is always some shade of purple, who sits through terrible first-grade plays like they're Broadway." "That's very touching," Melissa's lawyer said, "but emotional speeches don't change facts." "You want facts?" Claire's CEO voice emerged. "Fact. Luke has been Sophie's sole caregiver for 3 years without missing a school event, a doctor's appointment, or a bedtime story. Fact. Sophie is thriving. Her teachers call her bright, well-adjusted kind. Fact. When given the choice between $1 million reward and helping his community, Luke chose community." She looked back at the judge. "I run a billion-dollar company. I've negotiated with titans of industry, and I have never met anyone more capable than Luke Bennett. He doesn't need money to be a good father. He already is one. The best I've ever seen." "You're biased," Melissa snapped, breaking protocol. "Yes," Claire agreed. "I'm biased because I love them, but I'm also observant. And what I observe is a little girl who lights up when her father walks in a room, who feels safe enough to be silly, to make mistakes, to dream big because she knows he'll catch her if she falls." The judge called for a recess. In the hallway, Melissa approached Luke. "You think you've won," she said quietly. "With your girlfriend's pretty speech." "I think Sophie should be with the parent who actually knows her," Luke replied. "I'm her mother." "No," Luke said firmly. "You're the woman who gave birth to her. Claire has been more of a mother in 3 months than you were in 3 years. When they returned, the judge called Sophie in to speak with her privately in chambers. Luke wanted to protest to protect her from this, but his lawyer shook his head. 20 minutes later, the longest 20 minutes of Luke's life, they returned. Sophie ran straight to Luke, burying her face in his chest. The judge spoke carefully. "Mr. Bennett, the court has concerns about your financial situation and recent media attention. However, Sophie was very clear about where she wants to be. She spoke eloquently about her life with you, her routines, her friends, and yes, Ms. Whitman, whom she seems to view as family." Melissa's lawyer started to object, but the judge held up her hand. "Mrs. Patterson, you abandoned your child 3 years ago. Whatever your reasons, that fact remains. Mr. Bennett has been a devoted single parent under difficult circumstances. The court sees no reason to disrupt Sophie's life now." "Your Honor. However," the judge continued, "I'm granting Mrs. Patterson supervised visitation rights should she choose to exercise them. 1 weekend a month with a social worker present, if Sophie agrees." Luke felt relief so intense his knees nearly buckled. Claire's hand found his squeezing tight. Outside the courthouse, Melissa stood by her car, her husband looking uncomfortable beside her. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes, it is," Luke replied. "You want to visit Sophie? Fine. Show up. Be consistent. Be a mother. But if you disappear again, if you hurt her, we're done. Forever." Melissa looked at Claire. You think you've won something here, you'll get bored. Rich people always do. And when you leave, you'll break both their hearts. Claire stepped forward. The only person who left is you. And you're right, I am rich. Rich enough to make sure Sophie has everything she needs. Rich enough to hire security if you ever threaten this family again. But mostly rich enough in love to know what really matters. Melissa left without another word. That night they celebrated at Luigi's Pizza and Ice Cream, and Sophie, chattering nonstop about telling the judge about her purple room at Claire's house and her reading nook at home, and how she had 2 homes now, but they were really one family. Did you mean it? Sophie asked Claire suddenly. About being family. Every word. So you'll marry Daddy? Luke choked on his pizza. Sophie, what the judge asked if I wanted you to get married, and I said yes. She asked what? Luke stared at his daughter. She asked if I'd be happy if you and Miss Claire got married. I said I'd be the happiest girl in the whole world. Sophie turned to Claire. So will you? Claire looked at Luke, her eyes sparkling. I think your dad has to ask first. Daddy? Luke laughed, shaking his head. Not here, baby. When I ask Claire to marry me, it'll be special. When? Claire asked softly. Not if... Luke met her eyes. When? 3 weeks later, on a rare sunny Seattle Saturday, Luke took Claire and Sophie to the bridge where it all started. The construction was finished now. The beam that had nearly killed Claire replaced traffic flowing smoothly. Why are we here? Sophie asked. Luke knelt down to her level. This is where I met Claire, where everything changed. Where you saved her, where we saved each other. He turned to Claire still on one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a massive diamond, but a simple band with 3 stones, an emerald for Claire's eyes, a purple amethyst for Sophie, and a blue sapphire for himself. It's not expensive, he started. It's perfect, Claire interrupted, tears streaming. You haven't let me ask yet. Then ask. Claire Whitman, will you marry us, Sophie and me? Will you be our family officially? Say yes, Sophie shouted, bouncing with excitement. Yes! Claire laughed through her tears. Yes to both of you. Yes to everything. As Luke slipped the ring on her finger, Sophie wedged herself between them for a 3-way hug. Cars honked as they passed, probably annoyed at the people stopped on the bridge, but Luke didn't care. 6 months later, they married in the park, where Sophie liked to feed ducks. Nothing fancy, just family, the construction crew and a few of Claire's colleagues who'd learned to see past Luke's calluses to the man beneath. Claire had offered to pay for something elaborate, but Luke had refused. I don't need fancy, I just need you. She'd moved into their apartment officially, though they spent weekends at the penthouse. 2 homes, Sophie liked to say, because we have too much love for just one. The media had a field day with the wedding Billionaire Bride Chooses Love Over Luxury. But Claire and Luke didn't care. They were too busy building their life together. Claire still worked long hours, but she learned to delegate more. Luke still worked construction, but he'd accepted a foreman position that Tommy had been pushing him toward for years. Sophie thrived with 2 parents who adored her, even starting those soccer lessons she'd dreamed about. Melissa never took her visitation weekends. The court order remained gathering dust, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. One evening, a year after the wedding, they sat on Claire's penthouse balcony now, their penthouse balcony. Sophie was asleep inside, exhausted from her 7th birthday party. Luke and Claire sat together watching the city lights, her head on his shoulder. Do you ever regret it? Luke asked. Choosing us over something easier. Claire laughed softly. Easier, like what another CEO with a prenup and separate bedrooms. Another charity gala where everyone pretends to care about each other. You could have had anyone. I didn't want anyone. I wanted the man who gave me his only jacket in the rain, who refused a fortune to help others instead, who showed me that love isn't a transaction, it's a choice you make every day. Even when I'm stubborn, especially then, she kissed him softly. Though we're working on the asking for help thing. I asked you to reach the top shelf yesterday. That's progress. They sat in comfortable silence, the city sprawling below them. Then Claire shifted, reaching for something she'd hidden behind the cushions. I have something for you. It was an envelope. Inside, legal documents. Sophie's adoption papers, Claire said quietly. If you're ready, if she's ready, I want to make it official that she's mine too. Luke pulled her close, his throat too tight for words. He thought about that day on the bridge when he'd pulled a stranger from wreckage. How neither of them could have imagined this building a family from the ruins of their separate lonelinesses. She's been yours since you painted that terrible butterfly on her face, he finally managed. It was a beautiful butterfly. It was awful. Sophie loved it. Sophie loves you. He paused. We both do. I love you too, both of you, all of us. As if summoned by the conversation, Sophie appeared in the doorway, Mr. Hoppy dragging behind her. I had a bad dream, she mumbled, crawling into their laps. What about Sweetheart? Claire asked, her arms wrapping naturally around the little girl. I dreamed you went away. Never, Claire promised. We're family now, forever family, even when I'm grown up. Even when you're grown up and have your own kids and think your parents are embarrassing. Sophie giggled sleepily. You're already embarrassing. Daddy can't dance and you burn eggs. Thanks, kid, Luke laughed. But you're my embarrassing parents. Sophie yawned, settling between them. Both of you. She fell back asleep there, safe between them as the city lights twinkled below. Luke met Claire's eyes over their daughter's head, their daughter officially soon, and saw his whole future there. Not perfect, not easy, but real, and theirs, and worth every fight they'd had to get here. No regrets, Claire whispered. Only one, Luke whispered back. What? I should have kept the jacket. It was really expensive. Claire's laugh woke Sophie briefly, who mumbled something about keeping it down before burrowing deeper into their embrace. They stayed there until the sun began to rise, painting Seattle in shades of gold and possibility. The billionaire CEO who'd learned that money couldn't buy what mattered most. The construction worker who'd learned that accepting help wasn't weakness. And the little girl who'd brought them together, proving that sometimes the best families were the ones you chose to build. The adoption papers sat on their kitchen counter for 2 weeks before Sophie noticed them. She'd just turned 8, and her reading had improved dramatically, something Claire took immense pride in after all their evening homework sessions. What's petition for adoption? Sophie asked one morning, sounding out the words carefully while Luke scrambled eggs. Luke and Claire exchanged glances. They'd been waiting for the right moment, but Sophie had a talent for creating her own moments. It's, Luke started, then stopped. How did you explain this to an 8-year-old Claire, sat down beside Sophie, taking her small hands? It's papers that would make me officially your mom, not just your dad's wife, but your legal mom. Sophie's eyes went wide. But you're already my mom. In my heart, yes, but this would make it official in the law too. Only if you want it, though. Why wouldn't I want it? Sophie looked genuinely confused. Then I'd have 2 parents at school things like Katie does, and I could write Claire Whitman Bennett on the Mother's Day cards instead of just leaving it blank. Luke's throat tightened. He'd never known Sophie had been leaving those cards blank. You've been leaving them blank? Claire's voice was soft wounded. Well, yeah. I couldn't write my first mom's name because she doesn't want me. And I couldn't write yours because what if someone said you weren't really my mom? Sophie looked between them. But if we do the papers, then nobody can say that, right? Right, Claire whispered, pulling Sophie into a fierce hug. Nobody could ever say that. The adoption hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in September. Unlike the custody battle, this courtroom felt warm, the judge smiling as she reviewed the paperwork. Sophie, the judge asked gently, do you understand what's happening today? Sophie stood tall in her purple dress. Everything was still purple with her. Yes, ma'am. Claire is adopting me, so she's my mom for real, not just in our hearts. And how do you feel about that? Like Christmas and my birthday and the last day of school all at once. The judge laughed. That's a pretty good feeling. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, any words? Luke found he couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the moment. But Claire stood her CEO composure, barely containing her emotion. I never thought I'd be a mother, she said. I thought I was meant for boardrooms and business deals. But Sophie taught me that the biggest deals aren't closed in offices. They're made over homework at kitchen tables and reading nooks with fairy lights in moments when a little girl trusts you enough to fall asleep in your arms. She looked at Sophie. You made me a mother long before these papers, but thank you for letting me make it official. Adoption granted, the judge declared, and Sophie launched herself at Claire so hard they nearly toppled over. That night they celebrated at Luigi's, where Luigi himself brought out a cake that said, Happy Official Mom Day, in purple frosting. The construction crew showed up, Tommy leading a toast with beer and apple juice. To Claire, Tommy said, who proved that family isn't about blood or money or anything except showing up every damn day. But the celebration was interrupted by Luke's phone ringing. The number made his blood run cold, Melissa. He stepped outside to answer. What do you want? I heard about the adoption. Her voice was strange, thick. My daughter calls another woman mom. You gave up that right. I know. The fight seemed to have gone out of her. I know I did. Luke, I'm getting divorced. Richard left me for his secretary. Cliché, right? Luke said nothing, waiting. I thought I was upgrading, Melissa continued, laughing bitterly, trading a construction worker for an investment banker. But you know what? Richard never did. He never looked at me the way you looked at Claire in those courthouse photos, like she was his whole world. Melissa. I fucked up Luke. I threw away my family for money and status and a man who just traded me in for a younger model. She was crying now. And the worst part, Sophie's better off without me. She has Claire now. A real mother. You could still? No, I couldn't. I'm not built for it. The patience, the selflessness, the actual love it takes. Claire is. I've been reading the articles. She gave up international deals to make Sophie's school plays. She turned down a White House economic advisory position because it would mean too much time away. Melissa paused. She's the mother I should have been, but never could be. Why are you calling? To say I'm signing away my parental rights completely. Sophie deserves a clean slate, no shadow of me hanging over her happiness. Luke was quiet for a long moment. She might want to know you someday. Then I'll be here, but on her terms when she's ready, if she's ever ready. Melissa's voice broke. Tell her I'm sorry, and that signing those papers is the only good thing I've ever done as her mother. She hung up. Luke stood in the Seattle drizzle processing what had just happened. When he went back inside, Claire took one look at his face and excused herself from the table. What's wrong? She asked immediately. Luke told her about the call. Claire's expression went through several changes: anger, sadness, and finally understanding. She's right about one thing, Claire said quietly. Sophie is better off. Not because Melissa is some monster, but because she's honest about her limitations. That takes a kind of courage. You're defending her. I'm understanding her. I could have been her Luke. If I hadn't met you and Sophie, I'd have chosen boardrooms over bedtime stories too. The difference is you both saved me from that life. They returned to find Sophie teaching Tommy's kids a complicated clapping game. She looked up at them with those bright eyes that held no shadows of abandonment anymore. Everything okay, she asked, perceptive as always. Everything's perfect, baby tut, Luke said, meaning it. The months that followed were a revelation in what normal could look like when you built it yourself. Claire had restructured her company, promoting James to handle more of the day-to-day operations while she focused on strategic decisions that didn't require 18-hour days. She was home for dinner most nights, now had learned to cook without setting off smoke alarms, and had become an expert at third-grade math. Luke had accepted a promotion to senior foreman, overseeing multiple sites. The pay increase meant they didn't have to worry about choosing between groceries and Sophie's soccer equipment anymore. But more importantly, the regular hours meant he was home every evening. They'd kept both homes, the apartment for weekdays close to Sophie's school, and their work, and the penthouse for weekends. Sophie had decorated both her rooms exactly the same, down to the placement of Mr. Hoppy on the bed, so she'd never feel like she was somewhere different. It was a Thursday evening in November when everything shifted again. Claire had been feeling off for weeks, tired, nauseated, emotional, in ways that weren't like her. Luke had noticed, but attributed it to the stress of a major acquisition her company was pursuing. But that evening, as Sophie worked on a solar system project at the kitchen table, Claire emerged from the bathroom holding something behind her back, her face unreadable. Luke, she said quietly. We need to talk. Can it wait? Sophie asked without looking up. I need help with Jupiter's moons. In a minute, sweetheart, Claire said, her voice shaking slightly. Luke followed her to their bedroom concern building. What's wrong? Claire held out the pregnancy test. 2 lines, clear as day. Luke stared at it, his mind going completely blank. Is that? I'm pregnant. Claire sank onto the bed. I know we haven't talked about this. I know Sophie's enough. I know the timing is crazy with the acquisition and your new position, and Luke kissed her, cutting off her spiral. When he pulled back, he was grinning. We're having a baby. You're happy. Claire, I'm ecstatic. Are you happy? She started crying then, but she was smiling too. I'm terrified. I'm 43. That's considered geriatric pregnancy. There are risks, complications. And what if I'm terrible at it? What if... Hey, Luke said softly, sitting beside her, pulling her close. You're already an amazing mother. Sophie is proof of that. Sophie was already a person when I met her. This is starting from scratch. What if I don't have that instinct? Then we'll figure it out together, like we always do. They sat there for a moment before Sophie's voice called out, Did someone die? Why are you being so quiet? Luke and Claire looked at each other, communicating silently. Claire nodded. Sophie, can you come here for a second? Sophie appeared in the doorway, marker smudges on her face. Am I in trouble? No, baby. Come sit. Luke patted the bed between them. Sophie climbed up, looking worried. Is something bad happening? No, Claire said, taking Sophie's hand. Something surprising. Sophie, how would you feel about being a big sister? Sophie's eyes went impossibly wide. For real. Not like when Katie's mom had a baby and I just pretended. For real, oh, Luke confirmed. Claire's going to have a baby. Sophie was silent for so long that Claire started to worry. Then she launched herself at both of them, screaming with joy. A baby! A real baby! Can I name it? Can it live in my room? Will it like purple? What if it's a boy? Boys are gross, but I guess that's okay. When is it happening now? Not for about 7 months. Claire laughed, relief washing over her at Sophie's enthusiasm. 7 months. Sophie started counting on her fingers. That's June. A summer baby. We can take it to the beach and the park, and I can teach it everything. That night, Sophie insisted on sleeping in their bed, her hand on Claire's still flat stomach, whispering to the baby about all the things they'd do together. Luke and Claire lay awake after she'd finally dozed off, processing this new reality. We'll need a bigger apartment, Luke said practically. Or just move to the penthouse full time. Sophie would have to change schools. We'll figure it out. Claire was quiet for a moment. The media will have a field day. Geriatric pregnancy for billionaire mom. Let them. We've survived worse headlines. Luke, what if something goes wrong? The statistics at my age. Then we'll face it together. But Claire, what if everything goes right? She turned to look at him in the darkness. You really believe that everything could go right? Look at us. Look at what we've built from a car accident and a torn jacket. If that can turn into this family, then anything's possible. The next morning brought morning sickness with a vengeance. Sophie found Claire hunched over the toilet and immediately appointed herself morning sickness assistant, bringing crackers and ginger ale with the seriousness of a tiny nurse. Katie's mom said peppermint helps, Sophie announced, and not moving, and sometimes ice chips. You talked to Katie's mom, Claire managed between waves of nausea. I called her. I'm doing research. Sophie showed them a notebook where she'd started writing baby facts in purple marker. Did you know babies can hear music in their tummy? We should play it good music, not Daddy's construction site radio. Hey, Luke protested. Classic rock is good music. The baby needs Mozart, Sophie said firmly. To make it smart, Claire laughed weakly. We're going to have the most prepared baby in Seattle. The first doctor's appointment was terrifying. Claire gripped Luke's hand as they waited for the ultrasound, all her CEO composure gone. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Martinez understood their anxiety. "Everything looks perfect," she said, showing them the tiny flutter on the screen. "Strong heartbeat, good position. Due date looks like June 15th. "Father's Day is June 16th, Sophie piped up from where she'd been allowed to sit in the corner. "That would be the best present." They told the construction crew first at their usual Friday afternoon gathering. Tommy nearly dropped his beer. "Another Bennett baby. This city isn't ready." "It's going to be so spoiled," someone laughed. "A billionaire mom and Sophie as a big sister kid's doomed to be pampered." "Hey," Sophie protested, "I'm going to be strict bedtime at 8 and vegetables every day." The room erupted in laughter. These men who'd watched Luke struggle as a single father, who'd seen him fall in love with Claire, who'd been there through custody battles and media storms, they were family in every way that mattered. Telling Claire's board of directors was different. She called an emergency meeting, standing at the head of the conference table in a designer dress that still hid her slight bump. "I have an announcement. I'm pregnant. The baby is due in June. I'll be taking a 3-month maternity leave during which James will serve as interim CEO." She paused, looking at each board member. "Any questions?" "Claire," one of the older members started carefully, "given your age and the company's current trajectory." "My age is my business. My pregnancy is my business. The company will continue to thrive because I've built a team that doesn't require my constant presence. If anyone has concerns about my ability to lead while pregnant, I suggest you review our latest quarterly reports and reconsider." "What about the Tokyo expansion?" another member asked. "We'll proceed as planned. I can video conference from anywhere, including a nursery if necessary." The meeting ended with grudging congratulations. James lingered afterward. "You handled that well," he said. "Did I have a choice?" "You could have hidden it longer, waited until after the acquisition." Claire shook her head. "I'm done hiding things that matter for the sake of business. This baby, this family, they come first now." The Claire Whitman from 2 years ago would never have said that. The Claire Whitman from 2 years ago was alone in a Mercedes about to die. She looked out at the city. "I like this version better." Christmas came with Claire barely fitting into her dress for the company party. She'd wanted to skip it, but Luke insisted she show up proud and pregnant, letting everyone see that she was still the formidable CEO, even while growing a human. Sophie had appointed herself Claire's personal assistant for the evening, fetching water, finding chairs, glaring at anyone who stared too long at Claire's bump. "You're like a tiny bodyguard," Luke told her. "Someone has to protect the baby," Sophie said seriously. "It can't protect itself yet." David Chen was there because of course he was. He approached during cocktails, his smile as sharp as ever. "Claire, glowing, I see. Pregnancy suits you." "David," her voice could have frozen fire. "And Luke." David turned to him. "Still working construction. Still building things that matter," Luke replied evenly. "How working-class hero of you." David's eyes went to Sophie, who was getting juice from the bar. "And the ready-made family. Very convenient." Claire stepped forward, but Luke caught her arm. "He's not worth it." "Listen to your husband, Claire. Wouldn't want to stress the baby." David's smile turned nastier. "Though I wonder how the board feels about their CEO taking maternity leave during the Tokyo expansion. Very irresponsible." "You know what's irresponsible," Claire's voice carried, now drawing attention. "Stealing proprietary information, insider trading. Oh yes, David, I know about your recent SEC troubles. Amazing what investigators find when they really look." David's face went pale. "You wouldn't—" "I already have. Merry Christmas." Security appeared then, James having apparently summoned them. David was escorted out, his protests echoing through the ballroom. "That was beautiful," Luke murmured in Claire's ear. "I've been saving that for months," she admitted. "The pregnancy hormones just gave me the courage to do it publicly." Sophie returned with juice, looking between them. "Did I miss something good?" "Just your mom being amazing," Luke said. "So normal stuff then." Sophie handed Claire the juice. "The bartender said to tell you congratulations. Also, someone asked if I was adopted, and I got to say yes and show them the official papers. It was awesome." That night, back in their apartment, they decorated a small Christmas tree while Claire directed from the couch, her feet too swollen to stand much. Next year we'll have a baby for Christmas, Sophie said, hanging a purple ornament. We need to buy baby ornaments. Next year the baby will only be 6 months old, Claire pointed out. It won't really understand Christmas. But I will, Sophie said, and I'll explain everything. I'll be the best big sister teacher ever. Luke watched them, his daughter and his wife, planning for a future that included a new life they'd created together. 2 years ago, he'd been alone with Sophie in this apartment, stretching dollars and avoiding memories. Now it was full of laughter and plans, and Claire's designer shoes kicked off by the door next to Sophie's light-up sneakers. The second trimester brought energy back to Claire, and with it, a nesting instinct that manifested as reorganizing everything. She hired contractors to combine 2 bedrooms in the penthouse into a nursery, then fired them when they didn't understand her vision, then hired them back with detailed sketches Sophie had drawn. Purple? Luke asked, looking at the paint swatches. Gender neutral, Sophie explained, and the best color. You've created a monster, Luke told Claire, who was comparing 17 shades of lavender. I've created a daughter with excellent taste, Claire corrected. The 20-week ultrasound brought news that made Sophie literally dance in the examination room. A girl, she shrieked. I knew it. I told you I said it was a girl. How did you know? Dr. Martinez asked, amused. Because we needed one, Sophie said simply. To make things even. Luke met Claire's eyes over Sophie's head. She was crying happy tears this time. You okay? He asked softly. I'm having daughters, she whispered. Plural. I have daughters. That evening, they called Tommy and the crew. Claire's assistant, James Mrs. Chen from school, even Luigi from the pizza place. Everyone who'd become family over these strange, wonderful years. A girl, Claire announced, and Luke could hear the cheers through the phone even from across the room. But the pregnancy wasn't without its scares. At 28 weeks, Claire started having contractions. They rushed to the hospital, Sophie clutching Mr. Hoppy and Claire's hand equally tight. It's too early, Claire kept saying. She's not ready. Dr. Martinez was calm but serious. It's preterm labor. We're going to give you medication to stop it, but you'll need to be on bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. Bed rest? Claire looked panicked. I have a company to run. The Tokyo deal. We'll have to wait, Luke said firmly, or happen without you physically there. But, Mom, Sophie said using the title that still made Claire's breath catch. The baby is more important than Tokyo. Claire looked at her family. Luke steady and sure, Sophie fierce and protective, and nodded. You're right, both of you. Bed rest turned Claire into the world's most frustrated patient. She tried to run meetings from bed until Luke confiscated her laptop. She reorganized the entire apartment from the couch until Sophie hid the label maker. Finally, she surrendered to the reality of growing a human being more important than any deal. Read to me, she told Sophie one afternoon. Something that's not about quarterly reports. Sophie picked up Charlotte's Web, a book they'd read together dozens of times. But this time, she placed the book on Claire's belly so the baby can hear too. Luke would find them like that when he came home from work. Sophie reading, Claire listening, both hands on the bump that moved constantly now. She's going to come out knowing the whole story, Luke said. She's going to come out loved, Claire corrected. That's all that matters. The contractions started again at 35 weeks. This time Dr. Martinez didn't stop them. She's ready, she announced. Let's have a baby. Sophie wasn't allowed in the delivery room, but she stationed herself right outside with Tommy and his wife, who'd rushed to the hospital the moment Luke called. You've got this, Luke told Claire as the contractions intensified. You're the strongest person I know. I can't. You can. You pulled yourself through law school working 3 jobs. You built a billion-dollar company. You became Sophie's mother when you thought you didn't have the instinct. You can do this. 4 hours later, Lily Claire Bennett entered the world screaming and perfect and absolutely tiny. Luke cried when they placed her on Claire's chest. Claire cried when Luke cut the cord. And Sophie cried when they finally let her in to meet her sister. She's so small, Sophie whispered, afraid to touch her. You were this small once, Luke told her. No way. Even smaller, But look at you now, big and strong and ready to be the best big sister ever. Sophie reached out carefully, her finger touching Lily's tiny fist. Lily grabbed on, holding tight. She knows me, Sophie breathed. Of course she does, Claire said, exhausted but glowing. You've been talking to her for months. They brought Lily home to the apartment first. It was closer to the hospital for follow-up appointments. The space that had once seemed too small for Luke and Sophie now felt perfectly sized for their family of 4. That first night, Luke found Claire standing over Lily's bassinet at 3 a.m., just watching her breathe. You okay? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I'm terrified, she admitted. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not enough? You want to know a secret? Luke whispered. I ask myself the same thing every day. Every parent does. But look. He gestured to the doorway where Sophie had appeared, rubbing sleepy eyes. Is Lily okay? Sophie asked. She's perfect, baby. Go back to bed. But Sophie climbed onto their bed, instead curling up in the middle. I want to be close. In case she needs me. Claire looked at Luke. We did okay with that one. We did amazing with that one. We'll do amazing with this one, too. The weeks that followed were a blur of feedings and diapers, and Sophie singing to Lily whenever she cried. Claire took to motherhood with the same intensity she brought to everything, researching optimal feeding schedules and developmental milestones until Luke hid the parenting books. She's a baby, not a business proposal, he told her gently. She needs love food and clean diapers. Everything else is bonus. But what if... Claire, he kissed her forehead. Look at her. She's thriving. It was true. Lily was growing round and happy, smiling at 6 weeks. Sophie insisted it wasn't gas, laughing at 8 weeks, usually at Sophie's silly faces. The media had their field day, of course. Billionaire baby, the headline screamed. Photos of Claire pushing a stroller in sweats, looking exhausted but happy, sold for thousands. But the family had learned to ignore the noise. Let them watch, Claire said one afternoon as photographers followed them to the park. Let them see that money doesn't make you a good parent. Love does. Sophie, pushing Lily's stroller with intense concentration, added, and also knowing all the words to Wheels on the Bus. Lily really likes that one. When Lily was 3 months old, Claire returned to work part-time. She brought the baby with her, turning a corner of her office into a nursery. Board members were scandalized. Employees were delighted. This is highly unconventional, one board member complained during a meeting as Lily cooed from her bouncer. So was promoting from within instead of hiring externally. So was the Second Chances Fund. So was every decision that's tripled our stock price in 2 years, Claire replied calmly, while signing contracts and warming a bottle simultaneously. Unconventional seems to be working for us. Luke would stop by for lunch sometimes, bringing Sophie after summer camp. They'd eat takeout in Claire's massive office while Lily napped in her executive suite nursery, and Sophie would spin in the desk chair telling them about her day. Katie says we're weird, Sophie announced one day, because Mom is rich and Dad isn't, and we have 2 houses and Lily comes to work. Are we weird? Luke asked. Sophie considered this. Yeah, but good weird, like how purple is weird for a bedroom color, but it's still the best. Claire laughed so hard she nearly choked on her sandwich. That's going in my next board presentation. We're weird like purple bedrooms, unusual, but the best. Father's Day came with Seattle's typical June sunshine. They were at the penthouse, the whole family still in pajamas at noon. Lily was 5 months old now, sitting up with support, babbling constantly. Sophie had made Luke 17 Father's Day cards, 1 for each year until I can make them plus 1 for Lily, who can't write yet. Claire gave him a simple gift, a photo album she'd been secretly working on. Inside were pictures he'd never seen. Him reading to Sophie at the hospital after she'd scraped her knee. Him and Sophie at the Harvest Festival, both with painted faces. Him holding Lily for the first time, tears on his cheeks. The last photo was recent, all 4 of them at the park, Luke pushing Sophie on the swing while Claire held Lily, everyone laughing. When did you take these? I didn't. Various people did. Tommy James, even Mrs. Chen. People who saw what I saw, a man who defines what it means to be a father. Luke was too emotional to speak, so he just pulled her close, kissing her temple. Gross, Sophie said, but she was smiling. Do that when we're not here. We're always here, Luke pointed out. That's what family means. Then I guess I'll have to get used to gross stuff. Sophie sighed dramatically, making Lily giggle. That afternoon, Melissa called. It had been over a year since the adoption, since she'd signed away her rights. Luke almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. I know I have no right to call, she started immediately, especially today. But I saw the pictures online, your family at the park. You all looked so complete. We are. I know. That's why I'm calling. My therapist says I need closure. So this is me saying that I see it now, what I threw away, what I was too selfish to value. Sophie looks happy, really, truly happy. She is. And Claire, she's a better mother than I could have dreamed of being. Yes. There was a long pause. I'm moving to London. Richard and I are divorcing, and I got a job offer there. I wanted you to know I won't be around. Sophie won't have to worry about running into me. She doesn't worry about you at all, Melissa. She hasn't for a long time. The words were cruel, but true. Melissa was quiet then. Good. That's good. She deserves to not worry. Tell Claire thank you for being what I couldn't. I will. And Luke? You were right to fight for her. You were always the better parent. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. She hung up. Luke looked at his family, Claire helping Sophie feed Lily mashed banana, everyone getting messier by the second, and felt nothing but gratitude. Melissa's call was just an echo from another life, one that led to this moment, but had no power over it. That evening, as fireworks lit up the Seattle skyline, some rich neighbor celebrating something, they sat on the penthouse balcony. Sophie had finally crashed, curled up between them, with her head on Luke's lap and her feet on Claire's. Lily slept in Claire's arms, milk-drunk and content. Did you ever imagine this? Claire asked softly. When you pulled me from that car? Never. I just saw someone who needed help. And I just saw a hero. Turns out we were both right. Luke thought about that day on the bridge, how one moment of choosing to help had changed everything. He thought about Sophie asking if he was going to marry Miss Claire before they'd even kissed. He thought about Claire in his old t-shirt making terrible eggs. He thought about custody battles and media storms and pregnancy scares and all the moments that had built this family. No regrets, he asked their old question. Only one, Claire said, smiling. What's that? I should have had the driver take a different route that day. Could have saved us both a lot of drama. But then we wouldn't have this. No, Claire agreed, looking at their daughters, at him, at the life they'd built from wreckage and redemption. We wouldn't have this. As if in agreement, Lily stirred in her sleep, one tiny hand reaching out. Sophie, still asleep, instinctively moved closer to her sister, and Luke and Claire sat in the gentle chaos of their perfect, imperfect family, knowing that sometimes the best things in life came from the worst moments, that sometimes a crashed Mercedes and a worn jacket could become a love story worth more than all the money in the world. The stars came out over Seattle, the city lights below them twinkling with possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, board meetings and construction sites, school plays and pediatrician appointments, the constant juggle of 2 careers and 2 kids, and a love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. But tonight, they were simply the Bennetts, Luke and Claire, Sophie and Lily. A construction worker who'd learned to accept help. A CEO who'd learned that wealth wasn't measured in dollars. An 8-year-old who'd taught them both about unconditional love. And a baby who'd completed their family in ways they'd never dared to dream. I love you, Luke whispered to his wife. I love you too, Claire whispered back. I love everyone. Sophie mumbled, apparently not as asleep as they'd thought. Even Lily when she spits up on me. They laughed quietly, carefully, trying not to wake the baby. And in that laughter was everything, every struggle that had brought them here, every choice that had built this moment, every tomorrow they'd face together. The city below went on with its business, unaware that high above a family that shouldn't exist on paper had proven that love wasn't logical, that connection couldn't be calculated, and that sometimes the best rescue was the one where everyone saved everyone else.